right.
Can we shut the other page?
Yeah, you can shut down the other page, and Lon, when you jump over, you should be good. Awesome. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna just do that quick thing again. We'll just play. I'll just put a thing up so people know they're in the right spot, and we should be good to go. All right. Well, third try is the charm, I guess, for the round table here today. We have about 25 people all back on already. So we're just going to kick this thing off and get rolling. And then if you're watching this roll back, then it'll look perfect to you. But it really wasn't to start this thing off. So I apologize for that. But here's the round table. We're going to be talking all about tactical firearms training. So the forum is open. I've already spoken with the panelists. There is going to be no real rhyme or reason to this discussion other than general topic. And everybody here, if you go to the chat right now, you're able to ask any questions that you have. And you're not limited to asking tactical questions. If it's any firearms related, law enforcement training related, please feel free to throw it out there. If we have time, we can get to it. Obviously, if you were watching the sessions earlier today, you noticed that you would have seen one from Lon Bartel, who's on this panel as well. So if you have questions for Lon, please feel free to throw those out. And I'm sure he'll do his best to answer those. So without any further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce the panel and just give you guys a little bit of their background and kick this thing off. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you sticking with me as I try to figure out how to use a computer.
Glad to be here.
Thanks, Adam. Pleasure.
Thanks, Adam.
All right. Yeah, absolutely, guys. So until we have another person who probably will be joining us. I'm not sure if they will or not, so I won't name drop them in case they don't show up. But why don't we go around the circle here? Lon, why don't we start with you? You've been on this program before. Just give everybody a quick background about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Lon Bartel. I'm currently the director of training for Vertra, which we're a super high-end training simulator. Many people have seen what we do. I've also taught for the largest manufacturer of force-on-force technology for about the last 7-8 years. I was a law enforcement officer in Arizona for about 20 years. And during that time, I was a subject matter expert for the state of Arizona on firearms as well as defensive tactics. I'm one of the original founders of the state's Tactical Officers Association. Founded that about 11 years ago, and served as the secretary for about 5 years. And researcher and kind of a science geek. I came law enforcement actually by way of the hard sciences. My background's actually in sports medicine, so everything that I I tend to look at from the lens of human performance in that fashion. And firearms training is no different.
Awesome. Craig?
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, gentlemen. Pleasure meeting you. I've been involved in firearms training since about 1995. I was still a civilian at the time. Since then, I was competing in IPSC and so on and teaching at the civilian level. Was certified to teach law enforcement, military, and armed security at the time. Joined the service. I'm in my 23rd year now with the service. And the last 14 of those have been with the full-time tactical unit. And within that 14, the last 5 years, I've been permanently the lead firearms instructor for the unit and the sniper coordinator for the sniper program. Also responsible for R&D of the equipment that we use. And again, also the unit armor. So I take care of all the equipment as well as still hopping on the operational call from time to time. Thank you.
Awesome. Nick?
Hello, everyone. Started with the military back in '85. So did the shooting team thing and firearms instruction, machine gun instruction, whatnot. Joined Montreal Police back in '94. Did a few things, instructing firearms, but through different squads. Worked plain clothes, investigations, patrol, obviously, and then went to SWAT back in 2004. So in my 17th year in SWAT, teaching everything from pistol, shotgun, rifle. I'm also the sniper instructor for the unit. As well, worked for SIG Academy as an instructor on contract, and so I have my own thing going with Grayscale Tactical Solutions up here, risk management and consulting.
Awesome. Well, I can see I'm highly outclassed in this roundtable, so that's fantastic. I have like a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, if that means anything. So, so I want to let's dive right into it, guys. So again, real quickly before we start taking questions and start having a conversation here, for everybody watching, we got quite a few people on here now. Welcome, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions at all for any of the instructors, please, anything in the chat, feel free to insert all your questions in there. We'll be able to bring them up. So, for example, we have Mike saying hello. So things like that, we can bring your questions up on screen. And later on in the show, we're going to be raffling off the rifle. My Listexia is kicking in again. The Springfield Armory St. Victor AR-15 rifle. So for those of you that attended the live annual general meeting, we're going to be doing a live draw. I'll probably have one of the guys just pick a number at random, and I'll show you the thing on the screen, so it is completely fair. And hopefully it'll be somebody who can actually get it. And so I know Craig and Nick and I are already automatically disqualified because our government sucks. But other than that, we'll get those rolling. And I'm also going to do some giveaways. And I don't know what we're going to be doing, but for those, and this is something that I did want to bring up, and I know the team at IALEFI wanted me to bring up during these events. A month or so ago, November, we ran the National Emergency Responder Conference. It was a one-day event, but it was dedicated totally towards officer mental health and mental health for first responders, and how to build resiliency and how to establish resiliency within your agencies and at home. And so obviously that is a very important topic, and access to that seminar or to that entire training event that we did is still open until the end of this month. So what I'm going to do here is when I stop talking, I'm going to put the link in the chat here for everybody, and I'm also going to make that available under the information tab on the IALEFI online website, so that you're going to be able to access that as well. It will be completely free, and I think there's 8 sessions in there, all on mental health. So make sure to check that out. And on that, what I want to do also is we're going to raffle off some gear. So we had some of these I Got Your 6 shirts made up for the event. We got some fancy patches, and then I got some of these Roundtable shirts and a bunch of knives from my friends over at LA Police Gear. So I'm going to come up with some ideas, and maybe we'll ask some questions of the crowd. And if you get them right, we're going to send you some gift packages for being here with us today. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, gentlemen. When I approached you guys originally, and I said we're going to do a roundtable, we're going to be doing it on firearms training, but more so on the tactical side of things. What was the first thing that jumped into your head?
We could argue definitions of that all day long.
All right, exactly. All right, let's start there. Let's start with some type of, when I say tactical firearms training, that can mean a million different things. Some people think it means teams training, high speed stuff. Some people just think it means being tactical in your movement, and any general patrol officer can do that. So where do you guys consider it to draw the line between basic officer training and something more advanced?
My opinion is, we still deal with firearms training in general. We can talk about tactical aspects of it. It's mastering the basics and exercising it faster than your opponent. But I think that you have to bring into the aspects of shooting, moving, and communicating. When we're really talking tactics, that's what we're saying. A tactic is conceptual. A tactic applies to multiple dynamics. It's not narrowly scoped like a technique. It's the overall structure and the overall philosophy that we're using. With that, like I said, I think you have to build in the shoot, move, and communicate component.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I agree with Lon. And with regards to that, the basic frontline officer, I strongly believe that, again, what are advanced techniques? It's basically the basics applied and mastered. You don't get to the advanced without practicing your basics. And I think in the tactical community, we're given the time and the budget to if you want to call it perfect our craft or better our craft through training versus the frontline officers. So we're at that advantage. In conjunction with what Lon was saying, that's where we're at an advantage, if you want to call it, at a higher level or skill set. We're expected to be at a higher skill set, and just given the fact that we have a budget to train and the time to train, definitely helps us getting to that level.
Yeah, I'll just jump in with both you guys. I mean, it's definitely the addition to making it a complete all the strategies that go with not just the mechanics of it. So it depends if it's high speed or not. If it's more teamwork, patrol officers will have a tendency of working more in pairs, whereas tactical teams it will lead to more complex training and operations. So it's a broad variety of. It's a very wide topic.
We got one more person here to throw into the mix. Wait till he's done a sip of coffee before I throw him in there to the wolves. Chris, how's it going, brother? Appreciate you taking the time and joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. A little technical difficulties, but I made it.
Yeah, it's okay. We had technical difficulties on our end too. This is what I do for a living, and I still screwed it up, so don't feel bad.
All right.
We everybody real quickly did a quick introduction about themselves. Why don't you just give us a quick Coles notes of what you do and where you're at?
All right. I'm Chris Carmen, full-time police officer down in Southern California, down in the United States. I know you'll sum up on our northern friends up north of the border. So nice to meet you all. I've been a police officer about 6 years. Part of that, I was worked for the military. Was in the military for about 10 years, United States Marine Corps. Carried some heavy gear for a long time. And then went private sector shortly after 2003 until about 2013, full-time working as a private military contractor. And I've been doing that private military contracting for, I don't know, since the beginning part of 2006 to current times now for DOD and DOS. So I get around pretty much. I like getting out and about, learning, increasing my capacity, and also meet new folks to drive the profession and just basically humanity forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I initially, so everyone's tracking how we got Chris on. And so everyone's wondering. So obviously, you guys know Lon because he's part of the IALEFI event. Craig and Nick, I know from up here in Canada, two of the top instructors that we have up here, and I'm lucky enough to be associated with these gentlemen. They wanted to jump on and share their knowledge. And with Chris, I reached out to the team at NTOA, and they said, you got to have Chris on. And so reached out to Chris, and he was willing to jump on. And so one thing that we do with these roundtables and with these events in general, and I just want to make this point now so I don't forget, collaboration is huge. And there's so much knowledge out there. And as instructors, we need to continually learn and continually to get outside of our bubble. And that's one of the things that I love doing with this is bringing people from different backgrounds, different experiences, different regions, and having discussions about how we do things and why we do things. And maybe it'll click for somebody and somebody's going to get something massive out of this event, whether it's a instructor that's here on the panel or it's somebody, an attendee that's watching and joining in as an attendee. So that's really why I put these things together. So I do just want to say thank you to the four of you guys for jumping on here and taking the time with us today. It's really awesome. Chris, right before you jumped on, the first question that I put out there to everybody was, where's the line drawn when we say tactical training, when it goes from a basic recruit officer to something more advanced?
I guess one word that comes to mind is fundamentals. I mean, those are like laws across any spectrum, anything from business to tactics. The correlation between business and tactics is probably no more clear today than ever. And to include the stock market, I'm a big number. I won't say big numbers guy, but I do follow a lot of sectors in the world, and because a lot of those sectors are very correlated and they affect different parts of our life in many different ways, and the world's much smaller than it actually is. So fundamentals, and we have to be thinkers, and what drives thinking, and what we do in that aspect is kind of for us in the United States, it's the U.S. Constitution, constitutional law, state law, and then department policy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of echoed what the other three guys said right before you. So that tells you that if if you come in out of the blue and come up with the same thing, I think it's a pretty fair way we can establish those lines there. And so with that, I mean, I want to kind of put it out there too, because we have a lot of guys here that have served both in the military and in law enforcement. And that's one of the big things that always comes up is, what training do we take from experience that we've had overseas now, and a lot of the the tier 1 stuff that's coming back and all the high speed stuff that we watch instructors try to do at some agencies with little to no success. Why does that happen is my first question. And where do we start getting the applicable knowledge from one or the other and start to collaborate the two? Anybody, you guys can jump in.
I think it's sort of like being a ski instructor. If I'm a downhill ski instructor, I'm into skiing. I know how to prepare my skis and get my my skills up, but it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily the best in cross country skiing. So I would say that some of the tools are the small arms, for example, are pretty much the same. And now we see in law enforcement, we've got, the lasers and the night vision capability for most units. So those tools, they all pretty much look the same, and mechanically will operate them pretty much the same. But after that, it's the rules of the game. And I think as an instructor, whether you're former military, if you're going into teaching law enforcement, it has to be you have to take into account the rules of the game. So the use of force policies and the rules of engagement. So teaching the mechanics is one thing, and you can be the best there is in teaching the mechanics. After that, it needs to be applied, because we get in trouble not so much. It's not so much how to shoot; it's more when to shoot, and that's when law enforcement personnel get in trouble. So if we're going to teach anybody, we need to take into account their mission and the parameters and the rules that they go by or they have to go by. So you can't just isolate. You can just isolate the mechanics, but somewhere down the line, if you're teaching, muzzle strikes to the chest to law enforcement, it doesn't work unless you're in a situation that, a grave situation where that warrants that, and that's the level of force you're going to use. But you can't systematically teach that to law enforcement. So I think we need to benefit from everybody, but it has to be taking into context.
Yeah, I think it's whether you call it context or understand the concepts. Sometimes people will have some specialized training that they receive from whatever source it happens to be. And it may be phenomenal training, but they don't always understand or don't realize the concepts that underlie it. Tactics aren't really about going left or right. It's the reasons behind why we go left and why we go right. And if the instructor went to, I'll call it the typical high speed, low drag, whatever training, great tactics, great techniques were taught. But if they really don't understand and master the concepts behind it, you might have an application of that when it's inappropriate. And we do see that occur in law enforcement. And unfortunately, it ends up costing us.
No, just to piggyback on lawns, it's like you said, the why, that comes back down to judgment, right? There's many case law in the United States that we've adopted, and because of officers not being trained in judgment skills, decision making, and that's probably one of the most undertaught skills is thinking. And how do we teach officers to think? Because at the end of the day, when that moment comes when they have to decide, because each officer has to decide when to use force and how to use force, and that includes deadly force. And no instructor is going to be there to tell them when and how to do it. They need to choose that force option based on the totality of the circumstances that they're faced with at that moment in time. And then, like I said, the why, that's huge.
I made the argument a long time ago that if I was to put together a SWAT team, I would want that team to be comprised more of chess players that I can teach how to shoot. I want those individuals that really, really have high speed cognitive processing. I can always teach them how to press a trigger. And, we do a lot of work with Travis Haley. Travis Haley's got a big banner in his facility, thinkers before shooters. I mean, it's the same concept. That component is I think critical to our success or to our failures.
A lot of that goes back to selection. You can have a selection process for SWAT, for example, and you need a good physical standard in your selection process. But if your selection process is only based on physical aptitudes, and you're not challenging the cognitive and the reactions to stressors and how people cope with that, then you're doomed. It's not something you're going to be able to teach people afterwards, how to stay calm under stress and manage that. But you will be able to get them to do more chin-ups and run fast or whatnot. So good physical standards, good skills in that sense. But after that, the selection needs to be focused. A lot of it needs to be focused, in my view, in decision making and maturity. And those are the things that afterwards you can work on all the hard skills.
I have an interesting question that probably will make more sense for those of us up here in Canada, because I'm assuming my two American counterparts are probably just going to laugh at this question. when I was listening to Nick there and we're talking about what we're looking for in the recruitment process. This is a conversation we had, one of the last roundtables we did, I think, actually on critical incident response teams. We talked about selection for those teams, but we also talked about general recruitment and selection for law enforcement. And one of the things that came up was, is it time to start actively selecting people for specific roles? And by that, I mean, we know the people that are switched on, that are good to go, that are like athletic, right? An athlete's an athlete, right? If I have an athlete, I could pretty much get him to play a sport. He may not be excellent at it, but he can probably figure it out, right? Same thing with shooting. And if their cognitive ability is up there, we're still able to teach them and train them. But some people are great with computers. And this is going to kind of go against everybody watching this right now, because everyone here is firearms instructors. But is it time to start hiring people where we say, your role, you are a police officer, but your role is going to be doing project B, and you do not need a firearm, and we don't need to qualify you with firearms. And maybe now we only have a select group of people that actually have that ability, like we do in other Commonwealth countries. What is everybody's thoughts on that?
You're seeing a push of civilian response teams in the United States, specifically in dealing with mental health, mental crisis type situations. And I'm not opposed to that. But at the same time, if you don't think that you're going to need law enforcement with the ability to quickly use force to mitigate things when it goes bad, you're wrong. If you have a psychologist in an office dealing with somebody and that person gets violent, he doesn't call another psychologist, he calls the police. So, we're going down another path of, what specific areas. If you want to apply it to the tactical arena, specifically a tactical team, I think you already start seeing some of that occur. I was a breacher. I'm 6 foot tall, 240 pounds. So mechanically, I can swing a sledge, and I got all unbelievable amounts of leverage that somebody who is 5'2" and much lighter than me doesn't have. But they can get in an attic and clear it where I can't. So we do see some selection based on physical capabilities and interests already from a tactical perspective. If you're speaking as a whole to law enforcement, that's coming. That specialized, maybe you're not carrying a gun thing, it's coming to the United States. We'll just see how that experiment goes.
I think we're going through that now in Canada, in some of the provinces where we're seeing, it's actually what Lon was saying, privatizing response to calls, involving emotionally disturbed persons and so on, which usually would be police capacity response, and going up to the level of attack team responding as well, depending on the threat level of the individual. But I agree that that push is happening now, and I don't know if recruitment is a matter of who's more suitable for what position, but I think at the end of the day too, it's a numbers game, where being given a budget to hire a certain amount, you don't want to lose that budget. So we kind of hire that certain number and kind of work with what we have. And even when we're running selection for the tactical unit, we are kind of at the mercy of what the service hired in the beginning. They have to do a certain number of years frontline before they can apply for the tactical unit. But we're kind of at the mercy of what who was hired in the beginning, and we have to sift through to get the best of that group. And we do run them through certain specific skills, shooting, physical abilities, and also just decision making at the level that they should be at coming in. We don't expect them to operate as a 5-year tactical person, but somebody who's just coming in needs to demonstrate a basic knowledge and understanding, and then we have to see the ability to train this person to that higher level. So we're kind of at the mercy of who's being hired right now.
Well, your question, Adam, makes me think of two things. First of all, is it hiring the hiring philosophy of a department, in the sense that will certain tasks be taken over by civilians when they're ultra specialized? For example, some financial crimes. Is it better to take a cop and try to make him into a financial not analyst, but investigator, with all the compared to someone who already has an MBA or has worked finance all their lives. That's, I think, certain jobs maybe are better suited combined with law enforcement personnel. Because it's not just like outsourcing. I was giving the example of financial crime. It's not like outsourcing it to a company and saying, okay, you do the investigation, because all of that later on goes into prosecution, into the court system. And also there's the criminal mindset that the cops will be better used to anyways. So, but you can have those specialists assisting you. It's like TAC medics. You can, some teams have their own TAC medics, and those guys are basically concentrating on the TAC medic side. But if one of your partners gravely injured, would you want a TAC medic if he's right there? Would you want a TAC medic who has some training as best he can because he's a tactical member, he has other duties to take care of it, or a paramedic who's specialized in that and has got a helmet on and who's protected by the team? I would say the paramedic or even the doctor. So it depends on the situation. I think to a certain extent we can be for sure. We'll train our own people. We'll push some of our people in different roles within, for example, a tactical unit, because as Lon was saying, some guys are better equipped to be the breachers, and the other guys are better equipped to be the climbers. But they're all part of a tactical team. So that's one aspect of the question. The other one is really civilians, bringing civilians into certain special tasks, because they'll have more experience than any of us that joined to be a cop to start with will ever gain during our career. So I think it's a very wide topic, and there's a lot of it depends.
Chris, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a very large, ambiguous question for sure. I think if we continue to do what we've always done, we're going to continue to get what we've got today. So we definitely need to leverage a lot of technology, and a lot of new capacities in the private as well as the law enforcement sector. I think in general, law enforcement's like a post-event response. Something happened, somebody broke into my house, or this happened, and then we respond. I think we start looking further down the road to see what we can do to leverage, our human resources, our skills, and new technology to, cut off and interdict some of these things that happen within the profession. And, going back to creating, folks don't normally gravitate to things they like, right? So me personally, I like the tactical side of it, one, because it helps me, stay abreast of what's going on a day-to-day basis. I gravitate towards, stolen vehicles, guns, gang stuff. So I like chasing. That's why I got into police work, to make a difference, right? And we each do that as officers, male and female, doesn't matter our gender. We leverage our personal and our upbringing, our skills, and our education, and we help society in our own unique way, right? So, those folks do gravitate towards financial sectors of the department or investigations, but officers still, for the most part, still have to go out and handle calls for service or crimes that spontaneously occur, right? And they have to have a basic understanding of the law and of basic tactics to keep themselves safe and the public safe. Because we know that if you introduce the wrong tactic at the wrong time, that could be very bad as well. So again, just going back into the judgment and decision making and selection. I know topic was brought up by one of the gentlemen. Selection, that's huge, because at the end of the day, no one's looking, and it's that individual working by themselves or collectively in a team, and their character is what's going to shine through, right? At the end of the day, if I'm a police officer, if I'm an instructor, if I'm a garbage man, who I am is my character, right? That that is huge, and that is sometimes overlooked and kind of like, you know what? I've heard this topic many times. Again, my father used to always say this. He's like, "Hey, don't don't tell me, show me." And you'd be surprised. I don't listen to folks as much as I watch what they do, and that comes with more of a, I guess, with experience and age, and you start watching what people do, and that'll tell you a lot about them, and especially when no one's looking. And like I said, if we see that on both sides, if when I'm engaging folks in the public, dealing with them, if I'm doing an investigation or an investigative stop, there's a lot of stimulus in the environment that I know how to focus on to let me know what's going on or how I should position myself or communicate to my partner. Basically, just read the environment, communicate, and think.
That's awesome. Fantastic answers, guys. There's a ton of questions now piled into the chat, and a lot of they range from everything from optics to low ammo training to implementing DT training to a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm just going to kind of try to stick with themes. And one of the ones that came up, Alexandra had this question. Once you have successfully completed the selection process, what do you recommend to address the stress management portions of our training? And then followed up with, that is, how are you implementing the human behavior / science aspect of what we know about the brain's abilities and limitations? Lon, I'm going to kick this one off to you. This is kind of what you did your entire session full on. So why don't you take this one first?
Yeah, it's one of my passions, but it's also one of my pet peeves, right? We say that we do stress inoculation training, and ultimately what we're doing is just stress exposure training. We're just exposing people to stress. Any instructor, and in my presentation I cover it, that claims to do stress inoculation training and they don't understand Donald Meachenbaum's work on stress inoculation, then you're probably not doing stress inoculation. The biggest mistake, the biggest piece that's missing from almost every program that I've seen across the country is the implementation of coping skills inside of the training environment. Coping skills vary from positive self-talk to one that we talk about all the time, autogenic breathing. But I rarely see situations where instructors force students to engage in autogenic breathing or combat breathing, square breathing, whatever you want to call it. That's a coping strategy or coping skill. So if we're going to have people do stress inoculation training, then we create the environment that allows them to be stressed more than what they're used to, a little bit more than what they're comfortable with. We have them conduct the skills required to solve the problem in that environment, make sure the coping strategies are part of that, and then we let them apply it. We let the consolidation occur, and then we do it again, only now we add to the complexity or the stress of the environment. And I don't see that. What I see is a lot of stress exposure training. We're going to go stress people out. We're going to go make this hard. Got it. You can make it hard. If you don't instill confidence, which is another coping strategy, being able to instill confidence. If you don't instill confidence in their ability, then it's just teaching them to be stressed out. And that doesn't necessarily help when you're talking about the cognitive aspects of performance. And, her question's phenomenal, but the second half of it, we could spend like a week and a half getting into the cognitive component of things, but just, picking apart just the stress inoculation training aspect of what we're talking about.
Yeah, you get no more time, but they'll see you on our next training event. Well, yeah, every single one. I get you riled in somewhere. What does everybody else think on that?
Yeah, I agree with what Lon's saying. I mean, hit it right on the head about exposure to stress. And I think where our training has come more recently, just because we've been exposed to, people in that field, such as Lon, who has a large experience, very large experience in that field that can guide us to better train our officers to deal with stress, is when we run our scenarios. Yeah, you're right. We're exposing them to stress, but instead of walking away regardless of the result, let's say we set up a hostage rescue scenario, let's say, and let's say that particular event was unsuccessful for that officer in that exercise. Instead of just kind of critiquing and walking away, we'll set them up for success, and we'll ask, "Oh, what were you thinking? What did you see? What did you do?" And then that's how we kind of debrief that scenario, and then we'll set up another one, probably similar, not the exact same way, and then give him some tools to work with, either breathing, scanning to get to help relieve some of that tunnel vision, then get him back in that room again. And, if it's a success, then we still go through a debriefing. Okay, what did you do better this time? What did you do different this time that you didn't do the last time? And then we kind of work through that way. So just kind of also allowing that officer to understand what his body and mind is going through, and certain ways of alleviating some of that stress that he's exposed to, and how to think clearly and deal with the threat at hand.
Well, if I can jump in, the first question is, what's the objective of the training? And a lot of times we're trying to combine, the mechanics with we're trying to do as they say, the 4 phases of war in the same weekend. So I think the objectives have to be clear to start with, and if it is putting people in a stressful situations to see their coping mechanisms or see how they deal with it, to later address it, sort of like a baseline, then fine, we need to see it as such. And as the guys were saying, we need to look at it, and see, are we creating training scars? Are we getting information out of this training? It's like accumulating a lot of stats, whether it's times on your draw, doing certain drills, or even if you're into running and you keep all your stats but you never analyze them, it's junk, it's garbage. So same goes with training. I think the stress part of it is okay, let's see what they do in a stressful situation, in a moderately stressful situation. For sure, if everything blows up and you're into an incredible scenario right off the bat, people eventually going to get freaked out. And as a trainer, what's your conclusion? Where do you go from there? So there has to be an objective. So that means you work backwards and you say, okay, what do I want to achieve here, and what will I get out of putting them in a certain situation, a scenario, and afterwards give them strategies, and then work on it as a building block approach.
Adam, I'm going to talk anyway, even though you wanted me to shut up. The 2 coping strategies that we could introduce in our firearms training programs right now immediately and make a huge impact is the utilization or pairing up of autogenic breathing with some type of implementation in our hand. Firearm, baton, OC, rifle, doesn't really matter. We psychologically pair those 2 things together. And the other, positive self-talk. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So if we can get folks to engage in positive self-talk, we know it makes an impact in the success or the failure in a mission. And those are 2 things we can implement right now.
I think it's great, like hearing some of the different talking points here. It's interesting, and living today, I know it's very difficult times, but it's probably no better time to be a human being today than more than ever. With the advent of technology, we could basically travel through time, and the truth is old. A lot of folks have been echoing a lot of the same things. They talk about self-talk, breathing. That's huge. I do it all the time. I've been doing it since as a kid, as a young athlete. I was doing it a large part of my life, but I really didn't know what I was doing, right? So as we mature and get older, we then meet folks and mentors and different folks in our profession, and we kind of refine these skill sets, if you will. And they talk about stress in the central nervous system. That's a huge topic. I mean, the central nervous system is a huge part of it. If you talk about tactical training and shooting, I mean, firearms training, it's a visual activity, right? So the central nervous system's two chief functions is to collect information about the body, right? And then the other big part of that is to collect the information about the environment, right? And we have to have an understanding of that and how that works. And, you know, not to the micro level, but the macro level to help us work better as trainers and also be better as individuals in a certain profession, right? Because perception drives performance. We talk about that, and like I know that some of the instructors are talking about, hey, you know, they apply a Socratic method, which is good after a debrief. They do a run, they talk to the individual officer or the group of officers and ask them, you know, hey, how'd you things go? What'd you see? So, you know, we all look at things differently, because if we don't embrace the uniqueness of that, then we're all looking at an event the same way. And if we're all looking at it the same way, nobody's thinking, right? And that's why a lot of these high performing teams and, you know, traveling the world and working with a lot of different instructors from, you know, a wide range of skill sets is very, very beneficial, because, you know, you get a wide range of eyes on a certain problem. And the more eyes, visibility you have on it, the better you could solve that problem. And like you said, like reverse engineering what am I trying to accomplish? Just like Nick said, right? And then I can reverse engineer that training to fit that outcome. Like you said, there's always new technology. There's always, new tactics that are being, implemented. But at the end of the day, the truth is old, and it falls down to basic fundamentals of what I'm trying to accomplish. And again, that's involves the central nervous system and just engaging your brain, right? General Mattis, he was, my general during my time in the Marine Corps. The most important piece of real estate on the battlefield is the 6 inches between your ears.
Fantastic quote. Great quote. One of the things that's blowing up the chat right now, and you just brought up different technologies and stuff like that. The talk about optics is going bananas in the chat right now. And there seems to be two opposing sides, as we knew there would be. And a lot of it comes down to, and a lot of the conversation is obviously going to be red dot optics on your duty pistol. And so there's a lot of things in the chat here. So I'm going to try to track back to where this conversation actually started here. But it's a lot about, okay, here we go. So the first one, John says, optics on handguns is the current LE fad. I have a problem with it because it messes up my natural point of aim at presentation. And then it goes down to, people asking if they think the fad's going to go away. People agreeing is that it lowers their natural point of aim, and due to muscle memory over a long period of time, that could be an issue. And then everything from technology is improving to, I mean, there's so many. You guys can read these as you want. So here's the question: what do we do with optics? I don't think they're going away. I remember, God, must have been 10 years ago now, 10, 12 years ago. I got my hands on some old Crucible, Kelly McCann Crucible training videos where he was talking about using a red dot optic on his pistol and explained some of the science behind it. And that's the reason why I grabbed one up and I started shooting with one. And I'm not a proficient, I wouldn't consider myself a good shooter by any means outside of my military training. And so for me, the red dot actually made a huge difference. It was almost like cheating. It felt like cheating when I shot with it. And now there's a very good argument that it could have sacrificed some of my fundamentals of shooting because I had the optic before I learned how to shoot very proficiently with iron sights. But it was very useful. And for new officers that are coming in, there's a lot of them saying that it is, if we have the technology, why don't we use it? So I want to get this is completely open. So I want to get everybody's thoughts on it. Do you think it's just a fad? Or do you think it's here to stay? If it is here to stay, what are some of the things that we need to be cognizant of for our officers? You don't have to go as far as saying what is your general opinion on it, but let's get into it.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I've played with both. Again, I actually started shooting about 1983. I was a young teenager at the time. My uncle in the military exposed me to the Browning high power and fell in love with it since then. And obviously back then you're shooting iron sights. And visited the range a few times since then. And again, my profession took over in about 1995 when I started doing instructing and so on with actual pistols and revolvers and so on. The thing with it's not for everybody. It's a different training curve, if you want to call it that. I still think you have to consider who's going to be using it, the purpose in which they're going to be using it. Is it a secondary weapon? Is it a primary weapon? And the maintenance. Because again, batteries can die. The glass can break. The optic can get knocked off the top of the pistol. If you're going to be running with suppressor height iron sights or backup iron sights, you still need to know the fundamentals. I think it's very important to still learn using iron sights, basic fundamentals with sight alignment, sight acquisition, and so on, before you get into the red dot. Getting a little bit older now in life myself, I do find my eyes pick up the red dot easier, but now I've had a few years of exposure to that in training. So depending on if we're saying you're getting a brand new recruit, never touched a handgun in their life, and now you're going to hand them this firearm, yes, we can train them to that level, but if you're going to be running some form of backup iron sight, which I highly recommend, then they got to get back to basics. They got to know what the iron sights are all about before they appreciate a red dot. Similar to rifle, I know we run most of our carbines, or most people now run a tactical rifle with a red dot right off the bat. Even if you have backup iron sights, majority of the training is probably spent on that red dot, but we still have to go through the backup iron sights as well, again, just in case. But I think it's got some value. I don't think it's going away. If anything, technology is going to take us to another level where, it may become the predominant sighting system for handguns in the future.
Well, I think it's a game changer. As much as who would want, the question is this: who would want to go back to iron sights on the patrol rifle? A few years ago when they came in, everybody was talking about, well, it's technology, the batteries can die, the thing can break, and we have iron sights on. And they do, they can break. It's like digital watches back in the 80s when the digital watches came out. Oh no, a good sturdy watch. Who would want a digital watch? Who wants a regular watch now? Everybody's got a smartwatch because it does so much more. Another example in the 80s, late 80s, Canadian Forces Small Arms Competition, they had to change all the standards and up them because once the LCAN electronic sight came in, or the LCAN sight came in, everybody was hitting perfect scores. So what does that tell you? So I think it's a game changer. The caveat is as was mentioned, it's a training issue. I don't think it's the tool right now. You're better at distance with it. You're, older eyes are better with it. You've got one thing to focus on, and usually it's the target. Instead of trying to align everything. So you're looking at the target, which is a natural thing to do, and the dot superimposes itself onto it. So I think it's not a lot more natural. Now the problem is, and it was mentioned in the comments, is the presentation. So if you're sweeping, you're going to have a tough time finding that red dot. So I'm not sure, and this was mentioned by the panel as well, I'm not sure it's a tool for everyone right now. If your officers are training or they're qualifying once a year and they may be trained once a year, that's going to be a really tough. It's not like a rifle. You don't have all the support. So they're going to have a real tough time getting good and confident, because if you can't find that red dot, you're going to get really nervous, thinking that maybe in a confrontation you won't be able to see it. So, but all in all things considered, I do think it's a game changer. You look at the people that are shooting IPSC in open class, and they're faster than anybody else. Why do they make classes? Because they would beat everybody else if they did. Because they would beat everybody else because they have a red dot. So it is faster and you pick it up quicker. And that's what you want. And time's an issue in a confrontation. It's like the Far West. So So anyways, and just one last thing, just a pet peeve of mine, and it was mentioned in a comment. I don't think as instructors, we should still talk about muscle memory. It's procedural memory, muscle memory. It's terminology that we should maybe try to avoid. That's just my opinion.
I'm gonna go on a little bit of a
Everybody strap in.
yeah, pretty much, man, right? So let's go to the science, and I think that you got to start with that. What's the science tell us? Do we have research that supports the use of a red dot optic? Yeah, the military did a ton of it. They found that they were able to get people's basic skill sets trained faster with less ammunition, more accuracy, all kinds of stuff. But to immediately jump that the rifle and the handgun sight are equal doesn't necessarily pair out. We don't have a lot of research yet that I've seen that can support that unequivocally. Now, what are some of the advantages to a red dot optic? It's already been mentioned. We eliminate one of the sight planes. So whereas instead of having target, front sight, rear sight, so 3 sight planes to deal with, we essentially have one, and we can be target focused. The argument has been made in close quarter engagements. We tend to be threat focused anyways, and we can bring the optic into play. And then superimpose the dot as we need to. That's some of the arguments. And again, I think you got to test that. And that testing is a requirement if you want to evaluate the effectiveness. I don't think that we train the use of the optic, ideally. I go back to my exposure to red dots, and some of you out there remember the old Bindon aiming concept. Or the Bindon occlusion sight. That's one of the original first optics. I've got time on one of those. And I use that concept when I'm training people how to use the red dot. And then from there, we eliminate the utilization of the dot. We take it away. And you have to use not only your iron sights, but also being able to use the optic itself, the frame in close quarter engagements to help line up on a person or on a target. Bunch of different comments were made about force on force. Yeah, I think that if you're gonna do any type of training, it should include some type of force on force training to validate your tactics and validate your skill set. Putting holes in paper is easy. Doing it under stress when people are moving, the environment's changing, you're having cognitively to solve the problems in front of you, it changes the dynamics. So any evaluation needs to be done from a science base. Let's look at everything. Can we make the arguments that it's easier for older eyes? Sure. But if you've got somebody who's got so much time on an iron sight that to get them to transition is going to be difficult. Nick, thank you, brother, for talking about the fact that there's no such thing as muscle memory. Muscles don't have memories. Completely resides in our brain and in the nervous system. So he's 100% correct on that. But if the dominant program that they have, procedural program, motor program, the dominant program is utilization of iron sights, you're gonna have to spend a lot of time getting them to transition to that red dot. And you still have the issue, and we've talked about this, Adam, before, of it's called a spontaneous reoccurrence of a previously extinguished response. Because you had this program there, things in the environment, memories, colors, shapes, any number of things can actually trigger the old program. Kind of like when you're trying to make transitions to new holsters and you do the old holster draw and you rip your belt, under your armpit, but the gun doesn't come out. We have to evaluate all of that. I also don't think there are too many of the red dot sights that are out there that are purposely built to fight with. They might be great for shooting paper and plates and all kinds of stuff, but here in Arizona, we have what I refer to affectionately as moon dust, which is a type of very light dirt that if I'm rolling around with a bad guy, my dark blue uniform when I'm done is now brown because I'm covered in it. A lot of these sites have emitters that are exposed. So the moment I start getting dirt, debris, rain, and those kind of things, I start running into some issues about the image itself. And if that slows me down in my sight alignment and my presentation, it's going to cause some problems. So are we picking the right optic for the right event? Are we doing the right training? Is this person going to give it the time? And does the science support it? I think all of those questions really have to be looked at and answered before anybody just jumps out there and says, yeah, let's just go red dot, or they're horrible. I don't think it's as simplistic as that. Everything has its place. Everything can have a benefit and a purpose, but what's the trade-offs?
No, definitely the data. I mean, let's look at officers. I mean, at my agencies and a lot of agencies, you know, in the U.S., they're allowed to carry different variety of calibers and makes and models of firearms, right? Because we're all unique in our own way. We all are built different. We're all different shapes and sizes. Our hands are different shapes and sizes as well. And again, definitely, I think it's to keep it open to the individual officer to use that tool or resource that's going to actually give them the confidence, because again, it's psychological as well. You know, perceptions drives performance in order to be successful when that time comes, right? Because the last thing we want to do is have them second guess themselves when that time occurs. You know, and it's we start talking about a few different things. There's quite a lot there to unpack. I mean, we start talking about a new paradigm, right? A paradigm into red dot versus the paradigm of iron sight, right? A threat-based focus, or we talking about front sight focus, right? Both require a great deal of vision shift, right? We know, and I'm a big proponent. Faster is not necessarily the right answer, right? Because we can't shoot faster than we can think. I know the IPSC world and everyone training that way, it's great to build skills, right? But it's complementary to the police world, right? But in police world, we still have to think, right? Now IPSC targets are pretty they're pretty well known what you're going to do, right? I mean, it's a brown with A, B, and C zone, right? So I already know I'm going to shoot that target before I even, you know, once I hear that buzzer, right? So the real world, right? The ones that we carry firearms, and we're talking about the profession, or we're talking about a concealed carry holder, we have to articulate and see things, and that requires a sharp focus, right? So when we're looking at a threat, right, we just don't look at a gun. If we're just shooting people with guns, then that's an issue, because like again in the United States where I live, there's a lot of carry CCW holders. There's a lot of off-duty police officers that find themselves amongst society when critical incidents go down, like an active shooter, right? So again, the judgment component needs to be there, whether it be red dot or iron sight. I think it's up to the individual. Any agency or organization should embrace both, right? Because now I know Long talked about the very veteran officer, right? Because that officer needs to build procedural memory, right? He's got like 20 years of procedural memory embedded in his brain, right? So in order to develop a new paradigm, it's going to require a lot more training. And is that training worth the reward? It's going to be one of those things up to the individual and organization. So I say embrace both. And then data, we got to do a better job at tracking data at the organizational level too. I mean, just like snipers, we keep a logbook. I think ranges and each organization should develop its own data and keep its own records, so they can have an algorithm of what is going on, right? And then at the larger macro level, then we got it. Like for us in the U.S., it's the FBI, right? Like the NTOA. I mean, all these organizations have the responsibility to collect this stuff and then also share it with everybody, because that's the only way we're going to get better as an organization. It's always kind of like anything new is coming up. You always have people that hate change and hate the way things are, right? We got to add tools to the toolbox and make us better. And we can't have that stagnant mindset. It's all about growth. We need to grow. Until we embrace that philosophy, then we're just going to stay where we're at. So I say any technology comes online, definitely work it out in an R&D capacity, and then start to slowly implement it with your more proficient guys, and then just keep stats on it and go from there. But if people want to use iron sights and they're great with them, if it isn't broken, why try to fix it, right?
I'm being drawn back to a conversation that I had with Brian Willis. Now, pretty much everybody here knows Brian Willis. He was actually the first guy to run me through my very first instructor trainer program. And one of the things that he said in the class was, you're not there to show the students what you can do. You're there to show them what they can do. And Chris, what you had just said basically brings that point back. Just because you may be proficient at one thing and that's your thing and you're very good at it, maybe you don't need to be changing anything. That doesn't mean that every single person you're going to teach is going to be just as proficient as you are. And technology changes, times change, and certain people do things different ways. And I think that that's really a hard sticking point for a lot of instructors, where it's that humility component where it's, I have to learn how to teach people maybe something that I personally wouldn't do because it's better for them. And that seems to be what we're talking about here. I mean, in the chat, the conversation went, well, originally everybody had revolvers, and then it was a big thing to move between revolver to a semi. And then the same thing with weapon-mounted pistol lights. So, I mean, there's these, as technology changes, as we advance, there's all these things that happen. Is our optics that next step? I think they are. And I think that's kind of what we've come to. But as instructors, then, how do we start implementing that within our own training, within our own agencies? Like we're kind of at that cusp now where it's either kind of shit or get off the pot. Like we have to start adapting how we change or how we train.
If I can jump in there, I think we have a tendency as people, we have a tendency of seeing things very in a polarized way. It's either, is this better than that? Is this the best? Is this the only, we want the black or white answer. And reality, going back to what everybody said, Lon and Chris as well, it's not because it exists that we need it, but we need to examine it and to see if it fits. It's not, it's not buying a tractor trailer full of plastic pink flamingos because they were on special, and then realizing that you need to buy a house because you live in an apartment, you got to know where to put them, have no lawn. So it's the same thing. We need to look at what we're doing and our needs, our reality. And the same thing with the red dots, just rapidly going back to that. It may be the best thing for certain people or certain units and not for others. On a tactical team that has a lot of training, it may be the right move after, as Lon said, after all, the studies are made and see, is it a game changer for us? Is it something we can work on training wise and we can get rid of training issues and whatnot? But maybe for UC officers, they're not going to want the red dot on their micro pistol, so it's all a question of the needs and as trainers, how to implement that afterwards. Well, that's once again, how much training time can you give the people that are going to receive whatever new tool? First, do they need it? And then after that, well, how can we set up a training program that maximizes the training time and the skills, bring up the skill levels as far as we can bring them, and the maintenance, the skill maintenance afterwards. Maybe we can only give a week training right off the bat, but afterwards, if they only fire 50 rounds a year, well, that's going to be hard to maintain or keep those skills.
Now, if I can jump in one more thing, you can't buy performance, right? That just comes back to fundamentals. I think that was the first topic we started off with, is fundamentals. And I think a lot of organizations and really folks that don't pay attention to, like let's say the firearms sector, right? The industry, performance. Certain technologies are performance enhancers, but we shouldn't try to buy performance. We have to be very careful with that. And then it goes back to safety, right? Just like when we start teaching firearms, we start talking about safety first, right? There's fundamentals in the groundwork that got to be laid and understood, and to that shouldn't be a selling point is what I'm saying. Because I've heard it before. I'm on my last agency I work with. That was one of the things we went from 40 to 9. And, like I said, ballistics and performance today with technology, it's great. However, it should be a selling point for, just as a buying, we're going to buy performance. That just, for me, that should be a red flag.
Anybody else have any points on red dots? Probably lots. That's fine. John was also in the chat. I invited him to join us here also to share his, because he seems to be on the other side of things on this, on the where he doesn't agree with them. So I'd like to get his opinion on that, because I think that's super important as well, is that we get information, we challenge different points of view. I think that's something that we don't do enough. We get stuck in our own little bubble, and we say, Lon and I, we always joke about this when we talk about the inbred training that happens at agencies, where you're just like in this echo chamber of we're the best in the world and nobody can teach us anything, and then all of a sudden everything's passed you by. So I would love to share more information, and so if anybody here is of the opinion that red dots shouldn't be implemented, shoot me a quick message in the chat, and we'll maybe get you to join the conversation here so we can get your opinions on it, because I think that is very relevant. I think that'd be a really interesting conversation to have. All right, what is oh, here we go. John, how are you doing, sir?
All right, guys, how are you?
Coming at us from New Jersey.
A great evening.
Your hockey team's going to get killed this year.
Who?
Exactly.
Is that just a Canadian thing? Okay, never mind. Okay, so John, I was just saying to everybody here, obviously, you have some pretty strong opinions on red dots and things like that. So I'm just going to give you the floor. Share your thoughts on this and where you sit on this topic.
Okay. Been a firearms instructor for 43 years. Been through all the fads: revolvers, semi-automatic handguns, subguns, having rifles first in SWAT, then going to subguns and coming back to rifles because of the environment and certain incidents that dictate to people's financial worries and liability worries that switch us around on our equipment and our deployment tactics. I've been running firearms instructor, rifle instructor since 1989, both at the Division of Criminal Justice in New Jersey, with H&K's International Training Division for 5 years, and then back into New Jersey for another 10, and now with my own company. And I just want to explain where I'm coming from. I'm not coming from a scientific side. I'm not coming from a humanistic side. I'm not coming from logarithm side. I don't even know how to spell logarithms. I'm going to tell you what I watched with my own 2 eyes over all these years. Is that we're poorly trained. We are not set up for the stress of an armed encounter with any weapon. But as far as the rifle and the optics, I run my firearms instructor classes with optics only. And if they show up on Monday, they have to take the optics off. They zero with the iron sights. And in many cases, these people are showing up with guns that are on the street, in the car, that are shared with 5 to 10 to 15 different officers on the same zero. And going out to 100 yards. So we start out with that. We zero with it, and we learn how to zero and change iron sight. Now everybody shows up with a different barrel length, so we can't say that you do 1 click equals 1 inch at 100 yards. Everybody's a little bit different, and they learn that. They never knew that they needed to learn that. Then we can put the optics back on later on in the week for some practical stuff that we do. However, I will tell you this, that about 85% of the people that show up with optics on their guns don't put them back on at the end of the week because they didn't know that iron sights were so reliable, especially up close, and you didn't have to be perfect. You used the large optic on the iron sights and on the rear sights, and they just had no experience with that. All they were known, they were given a gun that had a red dot on it. They used that. They didn't know, okay, let's change, let's do, and we do this sometimes at lunchtime. We'll say, okay, let's zero your optic. Do you have the tool? No, I don't. I didn't know I had to have that tool. Do you know what the increment is from 100-yard line to change 1 inch at 100 yards? I have no idea. And this is almost 100% of the people who show up with optics in my classes. I run 5 classes a year, anywhere from 15 to 20 people in each class. We're seeing a lot of them. Now, I will say this, in the defense, and I know there's a lot of you people out there just taking the sledgehammer and ready to hit the TV right here. But this is New Jersey. And the biggest thing I learned from working with H&K's International Training Division and getting out with you folks and working with IALEFI around the country and around the world was that New Jersey was extremely behind the curve as far as firearms training. We have a target shooting mentality in this state. We have a qualification mentality. Our firearms instructors, most of them, are training our people to qualify, and that's it. There is no time for street training. There is no time for tactical training. And I believe that once Columbine hit and we went to active shooter, let me make it this way. Our patrol officers make more entries in a month than the busiest SWAT team in our state. Do they need the tactics? Do they need to know how to cut the pie? Do they need to know how to shoot from behind cover? Yes, they do. Do they do that during qualification? No. And that's all they do. They can pass the qualification course, but get involved in a shoot. You tell me why the first 3 shots are in the suspect's foot, shin, and knee. That happens in New Jersey. Now, you guys take a look around your state and see if you're as bad as we are. But the fact of the matter is, there are rifles going out on the street that the operator knows nothing about.
I'm going to leave it open to the panel, you guys. Anything you guys want to say to that?
Hey, John, I agree with you 100%. I understand. Like I said, I'm a little older guy. I was a Marine, and I was, the iron sights were ingrained in us. I wasn't until, I got out and got into the private sector some, 13 years later and started using red dots and everything like that. So understanding the fundamentals, again, the basics of that weapon system, that comes through education and repetition, right? Because repetition, you want to build the procedural components of memory, right? So we look at the fundamentals of marksmanship, right? The 7 fundamentals, and we start employing those each and every time we go out to the range and be deliberate. But also have a building block every time. And I think John talked about it earlier. Is what's our outcome, right? So anytime we go to the range, right, we have a specific plan. We can't just, willy-nilly just, shotgun, everything. We have to have a deliberate plan and a stair-step plan and be able to track our progress within our organization. And then as new officers are put in the organization, we have to then track their progress as well in comparison to other officers, right? So hopefully, you know, well, I mean, what does happen is we lower standards, right? And then, well, because, you know, officers, they can't get it. You know, they weren't around that technology. You know, they're just never going to get it. And it's like, I think I'll go on a limb here. I'll say as human beings, we tend to minimize our capabilities, right? And we all perform at different levels. And it's very important for us not to lower the standards. We have to keep the standards where they are. You know, we have to hold man and woman to a level of where they should be, because they're very surprising, because human beings will exceed that level. If we keep lowering the bar and saying we spoon feed kids, then the standard drops and we start backsliding, which is a slippery slope. And then I think, just like you were talking about, John, getting repetitions, or shooting guys in the foot, and more like in some of those critical instances, it's one, it's education, but it can't be that academic ticket punch of just shooting paper target, right? We shoot people. In law enforcement, we're going to shoot people. So why not shoot targets that readily duplicate that scenario, right? It's like, I don't know the last time I shot a bullseye was out in the street, right? My last shooting, I never saw a bullseye. It was a guy holding a gun pointed right at me. But then again, like you said, firearms has got to be intertwined with a lot of different skill sets that enhances officers, minimizes the risk and increases their survivability, right? And minimizes collateral damage. The last thing we want to do is, go back home with more holes than we came to work with. But more importantly, too, is that we don't want to become case law, right? That is a very likely scenario for some officers that are kind of like, they get into the profession that think we can just willy nilly just go out and just, hey, it's all about shooting fast. Bah, 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 bah. No, you have to be able to articulate your actions based on the totality of the circumstances, and that's a lot. That's where the judgment aspect and thinking comes in, coupled with the tactical aspect along with firearms. I mean, it's like an MMA fighter, right? I mean, you got to be well-rounded in all skill sets.
One of the issues is here, how can you send somebody out in the street with a tool they don't know how to use?
I've seen it. They do it all the time.
Where's the thinking there? And our problem is, in the firearms instructor classes that I have, I got guys telling me, John, we'd love to do this stuff that I have in my class, steel targets and all this movement and shooting from behind cars and things like that. And they go, we'd love to do that, but the administration only gives us 1 hour. The guys come off the street when they're working because they don't want to pay overtime. So our contracts get in the way, okay? So they come in off the road, they shoot the qualification, which takes 1 hour, and they're back on the street. That's all they do. That's all they have time for. So while the firearms instructor might be fired up by a lot of classes that they go to you guys, to my classes, they get all fired up. When they get home, that balloon gets deflated by the bureaucrats. And then they lose their incentive to try and teach within the qualification course some type of tactics. And that's why I try to drill into them. I said, if that's all you're allowed, here's a couple things that you can do during the qualification course that can give your people a semblance of tactics, And I also tell them, look, I can show you a lot of drills with only 4 rounds of ammo. There are a lot of drills out there, but I'm going to teach them the proper use of cover. I'm going to teach them lateral movement. I might teach them multiple targets. But there's a lot of things that we can do. And it's just these guys are so ingrained in this qualification mentality that they can't think out of the box. Our firearms instructors, they can't think out of the box. I'll tell you another thing. When these guys come, and they have to be firearms instructors to come to my rifle class. They have to be firearms instructors. when they come, I said, how many of you in the last 3 years spent $200 of your own money to go to a training event to improve your skills, either as an operator or as an instructor? Out of 30 people sitting in the class, I got one person to raise their hand. One person. Okay. Where is the motivation? There is none. There is none. They're frustrated. Okay. There is none. But I'll look around the room and there's 15 or 20 optics, which none of them know how to use. So they'll go out and spend money on all this crap, but they don't know the basics. Nor are they willing to go out and teach themselves the basics. They think that they have to, that the agency is going to provide what they want. And if the agency doesn't do it, they're not going to do it by themselves. They are not motivated. It's scary.
I think it's interesting what you said. Yeah, just real quick, John, just to double tap. That comes with culture, right? Every organization has its own culture, and a lot of officers will stay at a certain organization based on that culture, or they will leave and seek out another ecosystem, if you will. And like I said, there's a lot more to unpack there than with just that topic alone. But also, you talk about they are allotted X amount of time. That's unfortunate. That's a reality for law enforcement. And yes, we have to get creative. We could look at two things in two different ways, right? We can look at it as a situation or a dilemma of scarcity, right? I don't have any time, but I could also look at it. Okay, how can I get creative as an instructor or as a leader, right? Even if I'm not the instructor, does that mean I cannot vocalize my value, right? I can be like, hey, where I used to work, we used to do X, Y, and Z. This worked out great at roll call, spend 5 minutes, but then that requires purpose, right? Now, purpose is a game changer. I'll tell you, because like I said, somebody's belief in what they do is very strong. That's something that's ingrained in us, right? I get up every day, worrying about other people in my job and in my profession, right? Like you all have done throughout your careers, right? You wake up more thinking about others, right? That's why I do police work, right? Because I want to prevent somebody from becoming a victim, and I want to ensure that criminal doesn't, further go down the rabbit hole, if you will, and spiral down that criminal life. So I'm trying to hopefully save him from making some bad decisions. But that's what I believe. I firmly believe that, and I go out and do that every time I get, and every chance I get. But that's not isolated to police work. That permeates in my mental preparation for work, my physical fitness, right? The way I engage the community and my coworkers, and how I train in tactics and firearms, right? It's all driven by purpose. If I just don't care, it's the department's responsibility to do that. Yeah, okay, I know there's officers like that, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to own that when you find yourself confronted with a situation when you have to use force. And then, like I said, you don't want to become case law or worse, hurt somebody else when they shouldn't have, right? That's, like I said, that's a lot on that's what would keep me up at night if to say anything, to be underprepared. And you have to do, especially today, with everything going on. I'm not a big proponent. There's a monster around every corner, but you got to be prepared, right? You have to have your pace plan.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. They're very well taken. Let me just finish here. I know you guys probably want to do something else, but I put on the chat side, which you guys, I don't know if you guys get to see the chat side or not, but that Boston Marathon press conference the day after the bombing, the captain from the state police was giving a press conference, 10 o'clock in the morning. Behind him, on his right, were two Boston patrol officers, both with ARs. both with EOTechs on it. The one kid is standing behind his captain on national TV trying to turn his EOTech on, pushing the battery button, and then looking to see if it went on, and then push the button and looking to see if it went on, and pushing the button. He's out there on the street with a dead battery. That's reality. That's reality. That's not coming from a book. That's not coming from somebody's head or somebody's opinion. That's realities. These cops are on the street. And I'll give you one other true thing that happened. And that was I have a. I'm getting feedback here for some reason. Am I too close to the mic?
No, it's probably long. Go ahead.
I'm having a operators class, and I get 6 guys from one department in North Jersey show up. They got UMP subguns and EOTechs on all of them. So the first thing we do live fire after our classroom thing is we take them out to the 50-yard line and check their zero to see where the guns are. Out of the 6, the closest I could get to hitting the target was 6 feet high. That's the closest out of the 6 guns, 6 feet high up in the berm. Now, I talked to these guys about where they got the guns and what they were doing. And he says, oh, we were out at the Garden State Mall, which is a large mall up in North Jersey, where they had an active shooter. That active shooter ended up killing himself. He was found after he killed himself. But these guys told me that those guns were in that mall. But if you take your back and put it against Macy's and then point towards Penny's at the far end of the mall, a 6 foot high at 50-yard gun is into the 2nd story by the time it gets to Penny's. And these guns are out on the street with optics on them. Nobody knows where to hit. Now you tell me where the agency assures the people, the general public, the safety of a person with a badge and a gun going into a mall and have that kind of discrepancy in sight alignment. All EOTechs.
Well, and
I'm done because you got me guys revved up.
Let's talk about what we're saying. It's the same argument that we've all made. You can't buy performance. I don't care how much black spray paint and Velcro you put on it and call it tactical, charge 25% more. It doesn't give you performance. We understand that equipment doesn't necessarily guarantee that. Time of proper training does. We understand that agencies aren't going to do what they need to get our performance level where it is. Any expectation that an agency is going to give us all the time and all the equipment and everything else or the ammunition to get everybody really good, I would love to see that agency. There are dang few of those across the country. We know that's the case. It's the same argument that we've all been making for probably about 25 years. People showing up with equipment that they're not comfortable or familiar with. Happens all the time. We talk about the EOTechs. We can go back to the EOTechs where the heat issues or the cold temperature were causing sight drift, which was a mechanical reason or mechanical issue why they brought all of those sites back and paid agencies the money that they paid for them because they had some issues. But whether it's an EOTech or a light on a gun, it's your responsibility if that's your equipment to make sure it's working. Like you do your car, like you would do anything else. So it's not just the equipment, it's the responsibility of the person behind it. It's not the nut behind the bolt that we have to address in most of these situations. Agencies aren't going to give you all the time, money, effort to do what you need to do. Can we motivate people? No, not always. We have people that don't think they're going to get in a gunfight. It happens all, it's going to happen to other people, blah, blah, blah. No. It could happen to you tomorrow. We have those individuals and they won't do what they need to increase their skill set. They don't care if it's going to risk their life or somebody else. They it's just some of the dynamics that we deal with. There've been a couple of mentions of Aaron Cowan's work. If you want to get into, a guy that's done a ton of work, that is an example. Matt Jaquise from Victory Consulting, another guy that's done a ton of work with Red Dot, some of the originators. You got to go to some of their stuff if you're going to evaluate it. But really, it boils down to the nut behind the bolt, being responsible for their own equipment and their own performance. You want to talk about a culture's change? That's the culture change. That's where you start. Individual accountability. We did inspections. Is your rifle up to speed? Does your lights work? Does your optics work? Is everything good to go? All right, we're going to check it. Is it clean? It's your responsibility. And if they don't, you hold them accountable, or you should. But at the same time, they've got to be willing to work on their skills. We would love to say agencies are going to do what we need to do to get everybody great. Doesn't happen. They don't have the budgets for it. We get that.
Hey, Lon, that's a great theory. However, how do you get around a guy that's in a patrol vehicle that has either a rifle or a subgun with a red dot on it, and he doesn't know who zeroed that gun or where that gun is hitting, and he has to get out and deploy that weapon? They have to be responsible. If it was my gun, if they issued it to me, I would know where it is. The problem is are people who are preaching that these long guns, which are precision weapons, can be pool weapons like a shotgun. And that's not true.
But that goes back to the agency issue.
A shotgun is a point and shoot. A rifle is an aiming weapon. You've got to be able to aim that gun.
That goes back to the agency issue. And you struggle when you pool rifles. Could you get two operators on the same rifle? Yeah, deal with mechanical zero, find out where they're, what they need to click in for their particular zero. You can do that, sure. You can only do it so much, but it should be assigned to a person, and that's what we did. I eliminated pool rifles immediately. We assigned rifles. It made it much easier to know who was accountable for that weapons platform, and there was no excuse. Shotguns, you and I could have a beer and talk about shotguns. I think shotguns are a thinking man's weapon. It's a low-capacity, manually operated weapon with multiple types of ammunition, and if you throw in any type of breaching round, then you got a whole other mess to contend with. But a long gun is something that people shouldn't be pooling. I realize we're limited on resources, but for all of the things that we've talked about, I have no idea what the guy did with that weapon prior to me getting it. Did he stick the muzzle in the dirt? Do I have a barrel obstruction? Did he have a cigarette butt in his magazine when he loaded it last time? There's all kinds of components or issues that we run into with a pool and a long gun.
You got the problem with people playing with the windage knob. We had that with shotguns. The shotguns became the ashtray of the car. We used to have to clean them on Friday. We pulled out those shotguns, take the barrel off. We had cigarette butts in there, chewing gum, and everything else. Anything that's a pool will not be respected. But if you give a guy a patrol car, he will actually spend his own money, maybe once a year, but he will, to get the car washed. But if it's a pool car, you got last year's pizza and hamburgers still under the seat. Somebody has stole the spare tire out of the trunk, and nobody knows. And you know what? Nobody cares. Well, you got the same problem when you got a pool gun in there. That's a precision weapon. It's got to be cared for, and you're right. You have to hold them accountable for that. Otherwise, they just pass the buck. Not my gun.
And I think what we're circling back to, like what Lon's talking about, responsibility. We could sit here and debate what a good man and woman should be, but at the end of the day, just go out and be one, right? Everybody wants to embrace change. We don't change ourselves, right? There's a lot of accountability, right? And there's a lot of responsibility with what we can do as individuals, right? And we're all leaders, and that just takes action. We have to create a culture, an environment to make sure we're moving forward as a profession or in an industry, right? So, and that just requires good men and women doing the right thing, and just making sure as an organization, when we find ourselves in leadership capacities or positions, that we acknowledge that and we kind of cultivate that. If we're not, then at the end of the day, it's going to be that agency or that organization that is getting sued and losing millions and millions of dollars, and officers are going to go to jail. That's the last places you want to do, is lose money that cities are already bankrupt, having to pay more money. They need to start looking at that. And if you monetize that and you put a money figure with some of these bean counters, maybe they'll get it, right? You spend, let's say, a couple $1,000s a year versus paying out millions of dollars for a bad shoot, or taking somebody's life, right? Because that also has a whole bunch of other ripple effects within the community, right? I mean, we've seen that in the last few years with different things, and that's just use of force. That's not deadly force, lethal force we're talking about. That's just other components of it. So that's just something we have to, one, that relies on the individual officer. And that goes back to purpose. Like, why are we doing it? Why did I get in this profession, right? That I just kind of as a job, just to hang out, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you're doing that, statistical probability will probably catch up with you. Maybe you get lucky and you spend 20 years and nothing happens, but I don't think so. If you're hanging out, you're going to get exposed to something, and the last thing you want to do is you want to add value, not be a strap hanger.
I think one of the things here is that we're preaching in a certain way. We're preaching to the converted, because everybody on the site and IALEFI members, you pay your dues because you're interested in firearms training and firearms. Reality is, you've got officers that you're forcing them to carry a firearm because they'd rather carry a hammer or a pen or anything else. It just doesn't interest them. When I was working PSYOPs in the military, I used to say there's 3 tiers of people. You've got the people that are converted already. They're on your side. They love you. They think what you're doing is great. They believe it. So you just keep them entertained, and you just keep feeding them, and they're on your side already. Then you've got the second tier, which you're not too sure. You can bring them on your side. On the firearms instructor side, you can make them realize how applicable what you're teaching them is on the street, and how it help them survive and everything else. And even though there's not that much training, they should do the best they can during the training, and you can wheel those people in. And then you've got the other tier, because they don't care. They're the Taliban. Okay, so you're not going to convince them that women should drive and people should go to elections and whatever. They don't care. So whatever you're doing is this. And the first thing they ask on your range when they get there, is there Wi-Fi? And hopefully we're not, how long is the day going to be? Or, yeah, I've got something else this afternoon, or I don't want to be here. I'm forced to be here. So we're going to see that. And I'm lucky where I am, because I'm dealing with people that want to be here, who are volunteers, who want to learn. But even in that group, you've got people that love the shooting, they love the guns and everything else, but they're not as gun guys as the firearms instructors are. So they'll go to a certain extent with it, but then again, they'd rather be, I don't know, they'd rather be doing hand-to-hand, or they'd rather breach, or they'd rather do climb or do something else. So I think we're going to see that one way or the other. We're always going to have those tiers, and I think the main effort has to go into bring the people that you can save and you can still bring onto your side to progress and to get better, and that's the main effort that we have to put in.
Yeah, these are fantastic points, guys. I mean, the chat's blowing up, and what a fantastic topic. And John, hey, thank you for putting yourself out there and jumping on a call you probably never expected to be on. So thank you, sir, for taking the time and joining us here, man. So I appreciate you doing that. And while we get things going here, what I'm going to be doing is I want to give that live. I want to draw this live raffle, I guess we'll call it, for the rifle that we're going to give away. Now, I noticed that the conversation we were having was kind of leading more into the training development, instructor development, leadership type thing, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about tomorrow on tomorrow's IRT. So I want to kind of cut that off here, get back to some of the more tactical stuff that we can speak about. There's a lot of questions in earlier on that I want to get back to, but I also want to give the panelists here a break so they can go to the washroom, grab a drink, and I'm going to do this live draw here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen. So without giving away any real information here, you'll notice that on here we had 177 attendees in total for the live annual general meeting earlier in the day, which is fantastic. What a fantastic turnout. So if you are part of that, thank you so much. And so what I'm going to do is I randomized these earlier. They're completely random. So there's no, they're not by alphabet, or they're not alphabetical or anything like that. So I'm going to ask one of the guys here to pick a number between 1 and 177. 177. Wait for it. 177, and that person's going to win the rifle. So any takers? Does anybody want to throw a number out there?
Yeah, I'll throw one out. Oh, there you go. Someone did.
Okay, what is it?
I said 151. It's a proof.
There you All right. So we got 151. I just want to bring this out here so I can see. So that is going to be Robert Foti. Robert Foti? Not sure how to pronounce your name, Robert, but congratulations. You were the winner. And so I'll be in touch. We'll send some information out to your email. Obviously, we're going to have to coordinate that with Springfield. Hopefully you're eligible, and they'll be sending it directly from one of their distributors to you. So congratulations to you for winning that. And I also, so for John for jumping on, I'm going to give John one of these kits that I put together here, shirt, knife, patches, and stuff like that for John for taking the time and joining us. But what I want to do too is I want to give the instructors here an opportunity to ask a question. Any question you want, you can ask it. So there's 80 people on here right now live, all firearms instructors. I'll let you ask a question. It could be a skill testing question, whatever you want. And first person to answer it correctly is going to win another one of these gift bags. So Craig, Nick, Lon, any of you got a question that you think would be more difficult for an instructor, preferably?
Ooh.
We have a couple sharpshooters here. So why don't you pick some type of sniper question? Come on. Don't leave me. I would have come up with some if I thought you guys were going to draw a blank on this one.
Right. Well, someone could offer us a good explanation of parallax.
Oh, okay. All right. So the question is somebody on the chat to give a acceptable definition of parallax. And we'll wait for that. Okay, so that's awesome.
His question was better than mine.
What's that?
His question was better than mine.
All right. One of the Brian Marshall had asked a question, or had made a comment about here when just kind of going back to red dots. But he talked about simulator training. And so for those of you who haven't taken a look at the entire session tomorrow, you're going to see Brian actually has a training session. He's going to be going over a few things, and they actually use a simulator in their training that he's going to be demoing. And it's just to point out, it's not a Virtra training simulator. So Brian, what we're going to do after this is I'm going to hook you up with Lon. We're going to get you a deal to get you guys like a V180 or something at your agency. I think you should time to upgrade. So we'll get that set up with Virtra for you.
Great.
There you go. And but the question, and I now I'm trying to remember what it was because I can't scroll back through 1,000 comments. But it was something about how with the optics, and this doesn't have to necessarily be about optics specifically, it could be for anything. But when they use the optics, they weren't using them in the simulators. So you now have a discrepancy between what you're using in the field versus what you're using in a simulator training. Or also, we see that happen in some training scenarios where you're maybe using kit that isn't what you're issued. We've seen it where maybe your agency issues you a SIG, and now you're running Glock cert pistols through training or some type of simunition. So I want to open up that discussion about how important is it to have continuity between training and actually operating out in the field?
I'm going to break that down from the beginning of your line, and we'll take it to the end. Number one, if you're running on a simulator, if your simulator is set up right, you should even be able to use magnified optics. You can in our system. We can teach you how to actually set up your firing line where you can go up to about a 4-power, no issue. And it's because we run an actual true ballistic calculator in our system, which is part of it. But if you're not running an optic inside your simulated environment or in your force-on-force drills, if you're using, simunitions or whatever it is, you're not training with the equipment that you're going to use in the field. You might be engaging in an exercise, but you're certainly not using your equipment. And you see that all the time. The second component, Adam brought in, and I've talked about this significantly. If you're running a SIG double action, single action as a duty pistol, and then you go to train, and the training itself is using a Glock 17T, one of the blue guns, that's not a good environment for you to be in. My presentation, when I started talking about training the elephant versus the rider, you're bringing this incredibly emotionally charged environment of a force-on-force event or inside a training simulator that's affecting, that whole HPA axis, right? The hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal gland, and how it ties into memory and our procedural memory. And you're not using the equipment that you're going to be called upon actually in the field. That is a huge mistake. You are asking for training scars, and training scars sometimes show up. We don't realize it. And when we realize it, it's usually because there's a loss of life and something really bad happened.
There's just a comment here. They said the issue for me is training, red dot off the range and force on force. I don't see most of the agencies getting RDS added to them to simunition pistols. This seems like a huge gap.
It's true. You're not training with what you're going to use.
In the United States, there's already been case law for that. There's been like 2 distinct case laws where officers weren't replicating the field environments, and basically the city lost lawsuits, a tremendous amount of money based on situations like that. So right there with that specific topic alone, the officers that training training department leader needs to take that to the organizations, to the individuals that have control over that, and let them know that ultimately it's on their shoulders. And if they're not doing right and setting their human resources up for success, that, hey, it's on paper, it's on an email, this is on you. So when I say case law, I mean for the United States, it's actually I'll give you 2 distinct case laws. Pow versus Margate. That was one like 25 years ago when officers were in foot pursuit of a felon, and they got into officer involved shooting under low light conditions, and they never shot under low light conditions, and they never shot on the move, and they're asking these officers to perform and achieve these outcomes, but they weren't given the opportunity or trained to set themselves up to attain that goal. And that's kind of like where trainers are, and us as leaders and folks that have control over certain organizations or parameters. Take this back to the administrative parts of our organizations and communicate that with them. right? Because ultimately, it's somebody get relieved of command, or somebody will get sued, or jail time. I mean, that's the last thing people want to do when they get involved in public safety or law enforcement. But it's a reality.
Lon, do you got to take off here, brother?
Yeah, I got to go. I got case prep that I got to deal with tonight and early tomorrow morning. I'm hoping to actually make it to jiu-jitsu class in the morning, but depends how much casework I can get through tonight. So as always, it was a pleasure. You guys can get a hold of me. Adam's got all my contact info, as does IALEFI. My presentation ran today, Adam.
Yeah. They can, if they go to your speaker profile, all of your information is there to get a hold of you.
And then I'm doing my best to try to pick up on the instructor development tomorrow night with, having Dr. Bill Lewinsky on. It's kind of hard to, not do everything you can to be there. So that's my goal. Yeah,
tomorrow's IRT. You got Lon Bartel, you have Dr. Bill Lewinsky, you have Dr. John Black, and a few other people as well. So that's going to be a fantastic one. Just like this session, this is awesome. So Lon, thanks so much, brother. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you guys. Thank you, gents.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay. I want to get this before I forget. So the first thing that I can find here about parallax, and this was the definition. This is the first that was given. The difference in how the light plays around the edge of a lens compared to the center of the lens.
That's confusing.
Yeah, okay.
If you try to explain to people parallax using that, it's going to be difficult. I think.
Next option.
I mean, it's a good try, but it's not very a concrete example.
Okay.
I've seen
what
some
the optic
pretty
does
good
by
ones.
movement of your eye to the target.
What the optic does to the movement. Yeah, but it's not. That's the effect. It's not the definition of parallax.
Okay. Position of an object differs when viewed in a different position.
That's the effect.
The effect whereby the position of the. Geez, I don't know if anybody's going to get this.
No, actually, I've seen some.
Okay, so.
And once again, it's not because I'm not
here we
saying
go.
people don't understand it.
Maybe has it here. The apparent displacement or the difference in apparent direction of an object as seen from two different points, not on a straight line.
The apparent direction of an object. I've seen one. I can't find it right now. I'm gonna look for it, but earlier on it was mentioned, and it's a pretty good definition. Once again, I'm not saying people don't understand it. I'm just talking as instructors how to explain that to people so they quickly grasp the concept is not always easy.
This is the last one I can find. When the position of an object appears different when viewed from a different positions, like a camera or the scope.
We've seen a pretty good one earlier on, and I'll try in my own words. Something in the lines between the target and a reticle are on different planes.
Oh, okay. Here's one. This one right here. When the target and the reticle are on different planes in the optic.
Yeah, that's a good definition. Now the good. Let's say an easy way to explain it is you're driving and, the limit is 100. Your wife sitting next to you saying, okay, honey, we better speed it up. We're going to be late at my mom's. You're only going 90. And that's because on an old school meter, you're seeing both objects, meaning the dial itself and the hand leveled. You're seeing them on the same line of sight, whereas your wife is seeing it sideways. So she sees the hand, okay, at 90. So basically you're in a line of sight where you can actually see those two things line up They're on the same plane. So in a scope, it would be the reticle and the target. You're seeing them on the same plane. That's why you need to adjust the parallax to see it on the same plane. If you don't have parallax adjustment, because you're not running a sniper scope, basically, well, there's a fixed parallax, but there is one. There's a fixed parallax adjustment. But it's already adjusted for a fixed distance. And a lot of times it's 100 meters or 100 yards. But you'll find that explanation in Wikipedia, where the dial, you'll see that explanation. So when it's time to the difficulty, I should say, is to explain it to someone so that they would understand what parallax is. And in sniper school, you need to explain that.
Yeah, I think Brian here came the closest to what you were saying there. So Brian, congratulations, brother. If you want to send me an email, I'm going to put it in the chat here for you. Adam@ILET.network. Send me your details, and I'll send you off some gear. So good job there, brother. And thanks, Nick, for that question. That's fantastic. I learned something new today.
Welcome.
So it's always a good day when you learn something new.
Yeah.
and then Brian comes in with parallax 2 pills I have to take before a colonoscopy. Not quite, Brian. Not quite. Good effort. I like it. All right. So with all that being covered, we have about an hour left, guys. And I want to open this up to the three of you first to see if there's any topics that you really want to jump in on. There was some stuff earlier in the conversation in the chat talking about how to implement, and I'm going to see if I can scroll back to it, but it's basically how to implement defensive tactics training. No, I can't even get back that far. Into firearms training, and how do we do that, and when do we do it? So, I mean, and that's a very interesting discussion as well. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're talking about like defensive tactics with regard to weapons retention skills. That's something that we currently did some training with. That's the direction they're going in, how to incorporate both, where either utilizing the weapon itself as a tool where you're not justified to shoot, but to use it as lack of a better term, weapon of opportunity, to use as a striking implement or so. How to get the person off by using certain techniques. If the person gets you to the ground, how to defend yourself with, if you had a long gun plus your sidearm, plus taking this person, getting control of this person, getting them off of you to get back to your feet, to get back in the fight and gain some distance. That is something that we currently do as well. So I'm not sure if that's where the comment was going, how to incorporate both, but for that person, that's something they could think of introducing to their unit is from a weapon retention, do an entry, somebody grabs onto your weapon where you're not quite justified to shoot this person. If that's the angle they were going.
Yeah, if anybody's in the chat and you can either scroll back to those questions or you want to reintroduce those questions to us in regards to introducing defensive tactics training with firearms training, please go ahead and do that. I just noticed that I was muted. So what I said was, if anybody's in the chat right now and you want to scroll back, see what those questions were, or you want to reintroduce those questions, please go ahead and do so. Or any other questions that you want to ask. I mean, the panel's open. Please ask any questions that you have, and I'm sure these guys will be more than happy to answer them for you. So I'll leave it, again, I'm going to, with that topic, or leave it open to you guys. What is it that kind of top of your mind after discussing training for 2 hours?
Well, just to get back to the defensive tactics and training, I think I think it should be integrated. We're constantly looking at firearms training because it happens on the range as being done in silo, and then the force on force is done in another setting. It is difficult to put all of that together because of the nature of the firearms training with the live ammo. So you need to simulate some stuff, but we need to do our best to integrate it and to integrate. Really, it's the use of force that we need to, all the depth within the use of force that we need to be able to put in together. Because in in real life, that's what happens. It could be a strike and then a shot. It could be multiple things that happen very quickly in a very fluid environment. So if we want to get as close to reality as possible, we need in our training to simulate that, or to put that in our training. The problems I think that we encounter is when you're doing force-on-force stuff, when you want to do some striking, you've got some pretty massive suits that your role players are in, and a lot of times that prohibits us for having good communication. It's difficult sometimes to conduct some of the tactics. And also, when you show up in a scenario with a suit such as a fist suit and whatnot, while your players they know what's coming, they know it's going to be a strike, or they have a suit for the taser, so they know it's going to be a taser. So that kind of makes it somewhat difficult to. But you need to really try to keep it fluid, and put all of that together so that we integrate it. And it could be sim UTM or things like that for the firearms, and make sure that your instructors have that vision of not just saying, okay, right now it's 2 days or 3 days of force on force, or just control tactics, physical control tactics, and then it's only a shooting. We need to put it together, basically.
No, definitely. And it's like, I think we're all, both gentlemen are hitting the wave tops of that. I mean, the law and the department policy is going to drive, how we train and what force options we can employ as an officer. But like, John was saying, a layered defense, right? Force options. The real world is unpredictable, right? So, and like, why do we set up our training to be, or why do some set up training that is predictable, right? That the red man suit comes out, and we know this is what type of a scenario it is, or the taser suit comes out. It's like we have to create an environment where it replicates the real world, and the real world is unpredictable. There's a bunch of stimulus that's in front of us as an officer, and we're gonna mitigate risk and our exposure based on our tactics that we deploy, and how that again goes back to culture, how we train our officers, how we train ourselves, right? But that goes back engaging our brain and kind of, again, going back and going through that Rolodex of mental models of how we've been trained, right? Sometimes we have to isolate training for specific skill sets, and then, like you said, we want to make that storyline though, how to make it as applicable to the real world as possible, because that's what's really going to set the officer up or the team for success.
I think one thing, when you're wearing the protective suit, I know there's some new suits out there which aren't as large as the old style Redmond suit, a little bit more streamlined. But another way to, apart from you say force on force with SIM, even if you use SIM, or you could go to say secure blank, where you could pare down a little bit of the amount of protective gear you have on to not present that stimulus of, oh, here comes a big red man suit. I know it's going to be a beating or a shooting or something, but to also set the scenarios up that it doesn't always result in the use of force option. It could be verbal commands and the person complies. And you could set up, say, 5 scenarios that the officer has to go through, one after the other in close succession of each other. And you could have 1 or 2 of them where, it could be a shoot scenario. It could be a disarm scenario, just hands on. And it could just be verbal commands and the person complies. I think that's one way you could somewhat modify it. And again, this is to replicate what happens in real life, where sometimes verbal commands, you gain control of that person. Sometimes the fight's on. And unfortunately, sometimes you go to lethal force. So that's another way we could juggle those scenarios to somewhat replicate real world experience.
I think it's important also to get seasoned, your seasoned actors in your suits, and control the role playing so it goes as planned. Because sometimes what happens is that You get guys that are, they have the goodwill, but you put them in the suit, and you're behind, and you're trying to tell them to either bring it up a notch or whatever, and it doesn't fit well, or it doesn't. The response is going to be different because of the fact that your role player is not necessarily used to it or not getting it, or so. So I think it's important not to put the new guy in the suit, because maybe the older guys don't want to get the beating once again, but it's important to get seasoned people who know what the scenario is, who know the cues that you're looking for. So the planning, in order for all this to go well, I think the planning is essential. It's not one of those things that you just whip up. You need to go from the objective. What's the objective of this training? And it doesn't always have to be a doomsday scenario. The guys or the girls are waiting for that doomsday scenario where people jump out of behind the couch and attack them and whatnot. So I think by mixing it in, and that's what you were saying there, is if you mix it in, then you can get something that's more realistic, and with proper cues and good planning, I think you've got better chances of success for your training and integrating everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. So the comment here was, have others encountered similar experiences when the OPFOR becomes uncooperative and violent that the officers get behind in their OODA loop? And I'm gonna pretend like Lon had never left, because I know exactly what Lon would say to this. They actually, I know when he runs his scenarios, he actively searches out actors that are not law enforcement officers, because cops act like cops. Right? They know what's coming for the most part. They know what to expect. So they do a lot of work when they're running their scenarios in bringing in civilians or bringing in civilian actors that don't know how to necessarily handle a firearm. So that when you say, here's a gun in your waistband, I want you to pull it out and shoot at the officer when he does something, they do it, and they do it in a weird way that you wouldn't expect, because that's what is more realistic than having somebody do some type of tactical draw, and you're not getting that same exposure that you would in a real world scenario. And I think that's super important, and I think that's a huge component to building out these high fidelity training programs. In that, I mean, I remember years ago, and talking, and I think it was a conversation I had with Tony Blauer, but it was about when you're building out these training scenarios, you have to know what you're doing. I mean, you can't, just because you're an instructor doesn't mean that I got my instructor credentials last year and now I can go and put together this elaborate scenario-based training program without having been trained in how to do that effectively and correctly, because you can create some real training scars with your students by doing things the wrong way right off the bat. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Greg. No, go ahead.
Yeah, regarding actors, I totally agree. You bring in people that won't exactly act like police officers, or also predict what the officer is going to do. So either they like Nick was saying earlier on, either they start to ramp it up or lose sight of the objective of that particular training exercise, because they're now going to either contradict what the officer is going to do, and because they have an idea. So we do bring in like actors or officers that aren't familiar to the officers that are doing the scenario, and when you're coached properly to do the scenario the way we want it to be done, and they stick to their role, that brings a different element, and you can see it with the way officers perform, that somebody they're unfamiliar with because not their buddy anymore that they knew from before, or they do jitsu classes together, is an unfamiliar face or unfamiliar person. You definitely see the value in that unfamiliar of how that officer actually responds. And again, you're perfectly correct. Maybe bringing in civilian actors, just the way they hold a weapon or the way they respond to the commands. It's definitely an asset, bringing in unfamiliar people.
And especially when you want to create that environment. Let's say if we're because we contact people and within our communities, and depending on what you're looking for, you need to develop a baseline of what the normal person looks like, or what the opposite of that, and what the anomaly is for that high crime area, right? And what the pre-contact cues are. How do they dress for that location? right? Because that goes into a lot of a scanning sequence for an officer, right? I mean, we talk about, firearms is a visual activity. It is, right? So before I discharge my firearm, I have to, take the scene as a whole and basically find out what's in that scene, what I need to prioritize, right? And I have a scanning sequence, what I deal with each and every day. And I'm pretty methodical. I'm pretty methodical as one Marine, but I'm pretty systematic in how I live my life, regimented in how I do things, right? That doesn't mean that I can't grow. I do add and take from others that is beneficial, right? But it's applicable to my job. We talk about scanning sequences. It's very important for officers to understand that, right? Because especially for me being older, I became a police officer later on in life, and I had about 17 years of government and military work. And when I was working as going through the field training program, it would drive me nuts because for the same situations, my FTO would do something different each and every time. And for me, when you go to contact somebody, do arrest control, it should be pretty systematic, right? When you engage people, it's pretty systematic in how you do things to handle business in a safe and effective manner, right? So if we have too many, if we're kind of doing things differently each and every time, that just opens us up for basically deviation. And if we have any deviation, then that creates discrepancy within our process, right? So we just have to be very careful on how we train, and going back to seeing and knowing what bringing in outside actors and stuff. We want to replicate that environment that we're going to be operating in, and to bring folks that aren't acting like us is a huge benefit. I mean, that's one of the things I see is some of the virtual machines nowadays are moving forward, is that they're actually doing that, right? Because I know what a parolee on supervision looks like, but a lot of times, the way it's set up on a computer-based system is not necessarily that same stimulus I get on the street. We want to replicate that as best we can and set our officers up for success.
I think maybe the not the exception, but the situation in which you need to be careful by bringing outsiders would be a selection process. When you need every scenario to be run exactly the same stimulus, to be run the same way, so you can gauge your student or the person you're evaluating along the same lines, how they react at the same stimulus. So then if it's an outsider, that person needs to be really coherent in what they're doing. It needs to be cut and paste every time, so that we can properly evaluate the responses and have a fair evaluation of everybody. The other thing you can do as well is, and in my unit we've done that, is employ UCs. And a lot of times the undercover officers, not a lot of times, but they do have it. They have experience on the streets. They're within the criminal element. They know what's what, and at the same time they'll be within the loop and the OPSEC as well, as far as selection process will be maintained. So that could be, and they have a different look. So that could be another card in your game there.
Definitely, operational security is critical. I mean, like I said, what we do is not, rocket surgery. But again, we want to, protect as much as we can, and how we do things, and who we invite, and verify and validate who comes into our training. Because again, the world is very, very, very closed. It's very big, but also at the same time, it's technology. It allows us to communicate at the drop of a hat. So we just have to be very careful who we share that information with. And I know organizations do that already. So just to reiterate that.
I'm sitting here and I saw a question here, and then I started going down the rabbit hole trying to remember. So that to kind of just switch, before I switch topics completely, down another rabbit hole. Does anybody have any last points on this topic? Okay, so this was a thing that came up. The questions: moving targets. How do you address the issue? Annual training. How often? How much time? How many rounds? What equipment? Pulley system? Robots? Awesome. So this is going to be another 3-hour conversation. But it's funny, actually. Fun fact: if you want to talk, Nick and I actually did a podcast about a year ago. We talked a lot about qualifications and a lot about this stuff. So that'd be an interesting thing to go back and take a look at. But I was looking at here because it was talking about types of like pulley systems and robots. Craig or Nick, can you help me out? And I can't remember the brand name of the targets that we use in the CF, the green pop-up targets that actually have the electronic recorder in them that you can see on your shooting position. What are those called?
Tough one.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Well, I know which one you're talking about. I've shot them many times, but the name.
All right. Well, I'm going to do some research. I'll find that out for everybody. Those were a game changer. I mean, instead of having to go down to the butts, you can sit there and you have the electronic targets. It completely changed the game as far as how many rounds we could put down range in a day. What are your guys' thoughts on different types of ranges for officers? Where do you like? I get this is a completely broad topic, but I mean to take from that question, what ranges are you guys currently using, and should we be expanding what general patrol officers get to use in terms of ranges, firing positions, firing and movement that you guys get to do once you move on to the teams?
Yeah, I definitely think the frontline officers need to be exposed to some of the tactics we mentioned earlier on in our conversations with regards to, say, moving, use of cover, and so on, versus just that stationary range where, you're back at, 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters, and, shooting a certain number of rounds from that stationary position. I think if they don't have the luxury of getting out to some of the ranges that, say, the tactical unit gets to go to, like, a more outdoor ranges, different type of terrain, using vehicles, shooting some of the old vehicles that we have access to through glass and doing all that kind of experimenting and gaining that experience. I definitely think the frontline guys, if they're unfortunately they only have that indoor range, the agency's range that they have an indoor range. If there's somehow we can bring a vehicle on the range and utilize some vehicle movements, maybe don't have the luxury of shooting that particular vehicle, but just getting in and out of it, dealing with an attacker or dealing with a target, getting out of the vehicle as quick as you can, gaining some cover movement drills, use that to the best of their advantage if that's all that they have. But yeah, it would be great if they could get out to some other environments that they actually to simulate the environment in which they actually have to work within, for sure.
I just looked at while I was listening. I was listening to you. I just looked at the pop-up targets there. I think it was the Ivan target, but that's just a plastic target. But the whole system, I couldn't tell you. So, anyways, we'll go down that rabbit hole eventually. But what you were just talking about, the exposed to vehicles, just to moving around vehicles and deploying from vehicles. So if just bringing those on the range, doing a firepower demo. Basically, that's the old name for it. But a firepower demo, penetration demo on vehicles, it's an eye opener for our people, especially patrol. People who still hide behind car doors and stuff like that. And just see how a 9mm goes through everything, and so knowing the limits and the capabilities of their ammunition and possibly the opposition's ammunition. So that could be done. That could be done on a range as well. Just to set yourself up with a 270 degree range is right away a lot better than just the flat range. You can at least traverse a little bit and do some drills that involve real movement and not just the side to side shuffle. Those are things that can be pretty easily done to just enhance the training and make it a little more realistic, and obviously trying to get away from the super flat range drills where so many people are stacked together left and right. that when you're getting off the X, you're actually only taking one step left or one step right. And I couldn't tell you, I can't tell you how many people that have that, program into them to, as soon as they have a stoppage or whatnot, just take one step left or one step right. And in their mind, it's getting off the X. And that's because they've been trained that way, either in a stall in a indoor range or an outdoor range where everybody's, stacked up. So maybe do 2 relays so you get real room to move around and be able to, when it's time to do that, get off the X stuff, you can actually move to a barricade or move to something instead of just going through the motion. So I think those are fairly simple things that you can put together in a traditional range setting or without going into, stuff that needs, you need a lot of funds. And usually it's the tier 1 units that have like marathon targets or stuff like that. We've done that. We've taken RC buggies and put a pole on them with some balloons and made a moving target out of them. Or police, as it was mentioned earlier on, you can have a police system. Anything that puts at least a little more realism into it than just doing the flat range up drills.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the target that we were talking about. It's called the Green Ivan. It's with INV is the system. I put the name. I put it in the chat there. The link. This wasn't. It looks a little bit more built out than the ones that we use, because the ones that we used were mobile. And we actually use them to set up like 2 or 4 person ranges where we'd be do bounding and maybe set 4 targets up movement, and you'd move it and bound in front of each other, which is a whole nother thing talking about too, is actually taking the officer and putting and having somebody with a live firearm in training and having them inside of your field of view really changes things. I know it did for me when I first did it, because you're kind of like, oh shit, things just got real. Like if I screw this up, something bad's going to happen. Where do we get to that for law enforcement officers? When does that actually start becoming a reality?
It'd be training where you're actually training in pairs or in groups, like you're saying, where people are actually bounding. You have officers. I think even if you're going to initiate that training, you have to see where those individual officers are at. You have to start off. I guess to break it right down to bare bones is that the initial training has to be, again, that stationary flat range. I mean that could be just for the first half or an hour to establish who your personnel are, what their skill set is coming in on that particular day, exactly where they're at right now, their standard, and can you take that training up and then gradually maybe moving as a line, moving back as a line, and you're shooting while moving, any stoppages, any problems, solve it on the move. Don't be flat-footed while you're solving these problems. Start implementing that kind of training. So you might spend the first hour or so, as you have to plan your day. First hour to 2 hours could just be, lack of a better term, back to the basics, and then you start to incorporate moving as a group, moving as a team, and then you can start breaking it down to maybe 2-man elements where now, you're leapfrogging, you're bounding, and you are pretty much shooting while your partner's in view downrange. And then you can add, maybe add a 4-man element and so on. But I'd say before you get into that, as the instructor cadre, you have to be comfortable with your officers on that particular day by testing them initially coming in. Unless this is something they've been doing for a long time, then you can start with a basic warm-up and then get into that. But if you're getting a group for the first time, you introduce them to this kind of dynamic, and this is a crowd that only shoots their quals once a year and don't get out to the range very often, then for lack of a better term, baby steps. You got to see where they're at before you throw this kind of because the stress factor for them is going to be much higher versus a person who's been doing this for several years, for sure.
Yeah, definitely knowing your audience, right? I mean, that's a safety component. I mean, if you're a trainer, you're going to be ultimately responsible for that care of the individual and that training plan for the day. It's interesting that we talk about this on where do, let's say, patrol officers, where do they get involved in shootings? They get involved in shootings in neighborhoods, in apartment buildings, in homes, in schools, right? So, I've heard this conversation come up before. It's like, hey, we don't want patrol officers going to live fire shoot houses. It's like, why not? Why do you want him to discharge a firearm in a house for real in real life for the first time? Why wouldn't you want to, you know, build up a pattern, a mental model for them, you know, these processes in a training scenario, so we could kind of like, if something does go wrong in a training scenario, right, or they do make a mistake, as far as target discrimination, right? Because target discrimination is a huge component of it, right? It's just not just shooting a zone shots, right? We have to be discriminating and making a decision, scrutinizing each and every target, right? We're not looking for split times. We shouldn't be as law enforcement, right? We should be discriminating, and in order to discriminate, that takes time. It takes a very specific scanning sequence to discriminate each and every target we're confronted with on the street, right? And that could be anywhere from 1 to 2 to 4 people to 6 people to 8 people. I mean, we come into a room of school children. How many children are in a school? You know, like a couple hundred, right? Going into a mall. These are highly populated areas, and we talk about discharging firearms. I mean, we have to be aware of our positive identifier target, be aware of its foreground and background, and then that we talked about it earlier. It's like, right? If our 0 is good enough, right, and we compound that with interest, and we miss at 50 yards, that's 6 feet, right? So we have to be very, very accountable and responsible in how we train and our equipment, right? So it's like I said, it's very, very fundamental, but it's very, very serious.
I totally agree with Chris. You know, a shoot house is a range. It's not because you're conducting training in a shoot house that necessarily you have to go full speed and flashbang and whatnot. You can take patrol officers and, you know, set them up in a room and just shoot targets, you know, statically, and then just build on that. But to get people used to working around one another with firearms, loaded firearms, is essential, because the training scar on the flat range is exactly that. It's people on a line being told when to holster, when to unholster, when to load, when to unload. Oh, stay on line, don't move, you stay there, right there. It's super controlled. And I get it, it's a safety aspect. But at one point in time, there's a serious discrepancy between, you know, running a range that way and what they're going to encounter on the street when they're actually in a shopping mall with their gun out, and there is no, you know, there's the safe. Where's the safe area? They're going to need to figure out where the safe area is to point their fire, and it's not where the sand is with all those targets. So if you have access to a shoot house, and even if it's not a shoot house, but conducting training in apartment buildings or houses that resemble the kind of environment they're going to they actually work in, then with sim guns, or even if it's just you know, blanks or whatnot, the safety blanks, you know, it's going to put that much more realism into it. Try to tie everything together.
No, we get the officers into getting into the mental, building those emotions to be domesticated, if you will, and understanding we're all emotional creatures, right? So what happens is we don't want to make emotional based decisions. We want to make our decisions based on reason. Yes, and the more we expose ourselves to these situations, we become accustomed to them, and we can minimize our emotion if we feel ourselves coming up, and then it goes back to like we were talking about earlier with our central nervous system, and you know self-talk and breathing, right, and just falling back to fundamentals and how I should either deploy or employ my firearm skills based on fundamentals, or how I should fall back and employ my tactics fundamentally based on the situational requirements, right? Because what drives our tactics is going to be based on the situation. What am I confronted with? What's the dynamic intelligence? What am I getting from the environment? Or what is dispatch telling me? What is a crowd telling me? I mean, that's why the central nervous system is huge, and a lot of this, right? But like it all reverts back to like thinking and going back to ensure we're creating that environment in a training environment to cultivate that thinking, because it's like John said, right? We in some training environments we want everybody online and making it, hold these guys by the back. But when you're in the mall and there's let's say a threat out there, there's no X on the ground. No one's going to tell you where to stand. You got to be able to think and read the floor plan and communicate based on what you see and what's occurring right in front of you, right? I'm sorry, Nick was saying. Sorry about that. I was thinking of lawn earlier. Apologize.
All good. At least it came out, whoever said it.
There you go. There's a quick point that got brought up here, and before I forget, I wanted to bring it up. Doc said, at first I noticed a delay in the response to the verbal command of threat or up versus the sound of gunfire being used as the initial trigger for response. Coming up tomorrow, you're going to see Jacopo and Paolo out of Italy. And actually in their training, they cycle between using either threat or just a round. The instructor will fire a round and they use that as their trigger. So great question. What do you guys think about integrating the use of actual gunfire to signify the start of that iteration?
I would say the officers have to articulate, and for me, where I function at in the state of California, I have to the individual has to have the present ability, opportunity, and an apparent intent to cause death or serious bodily injury to myself or somebody else before I can use deadly force. If I just hear a gunshot, that doesn't, and I don't have a threat based on ability, opportunity, and an apparent intent, then I can't just squeeze off around. I can't. I have to justify and articulate why I did what I did, and we have to be very careful. I don't know the totality of what that training encompasses, but we don't want to have contagious fire or just go off a buzzer, or if somebody says gun, we've heard that before. We do a lot of vehicle assaults in California, and a lot of guys in California, this is a very gun restrictive state, but there's a lot of firearms in California that circulate in the criminal environment. So we come across these. I mean, if somebody says gun, we have to be very careful. I mean, I have to be able to see and articulate why I am going to potentially use force, right? I have to engage my brain before I discharge my firearm or use my hands to use personal body weapons or a baton or a taser, right? So I have to articulate these things because that's either going to be articulated in some sort of written report, or if it's a deadly force situation, I'm going to get interviewed, right? And there's going to be a couple of attorneys there. So, like I said, that there's a lot of this that goes in that comes into play when we do our training, that we set our officers up. And it's different, right? Because, like I said, in the military, private sector, it's all a little bit different. We just have to make sure the training environment we're going to create is an ecosystem to benefit that individual in the real world scenario.
I was sorry.
Sorry. So go ahead, Nick. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I totally agree with you, Chris. It's at first hand might sound like a great idea, but then again, it's the stimulus response. The same with a whistle, same with a buzzer, same with as you said, threat or gun, or I think most of the cues that we get, the danger cues are visual cues. Most of the cues that we get are visual. It's the hand that goes into a pocket, or we see something coming out and we need to identify, is it a gun, is it a knife, is it a cell phone, whatever it is. So it's not an easy, there's not an easy fix for range drills. But what I like to do is to tell my people that, okay, we're going to do a drill right now. It's a mechanics drill. For example, a 1, 2, 3 drill. 1 from the rifle, transition to pistol. 2, reload the rifle. 3 with the rifle. Now, obviously, you would not necessarily do that at all distances. You may stay on your rifle because you're at longer ranges. Maybe you'll move to your pistol because you're just going to protect yourself until you fix the problem with the long gun, but you're not necessarily going to fire because you're at maybe 50 meters or 60 meters. So when we're doing drills, it's hard to put it all to make it make sense, but we need to explain that this is a mechanics drill, so we're training this, and then put it into context in some scenarios. So when it's a gun firing somewhere or a sound firing, are you identifying something, or are you just reacting to a sound? And I think that could be problematic if that's a way that you're doing things systematically. And I like to work on visual cues when I can. So they need to identify, is it a threat, a possible threat? It doesn't mean it's a shoot all the time, because once again, if it's always a command to shoot, it's always a whistle to shoot, or whatever it is, or shot fired and you need to fire, you are creating some kind of a scar. If it's gun, what happens when my partner yells gun on a traffic stop, as you mentioned before? It doesn't mean I'm going to shoot, but I'm going to be tempted to, I'm going to be almost there because I've been going to the range and being told, gun, and the response was always to shoot. So I think we need to look at always to look at the possible training scars and everything that we do. And if we notice them, we need to address them and try to fix it. But I think the visual cues are 99% of the time what brings us to either draw the firearm or point it or to engage verbally or to fire, and not necessarily auditory.
Yeah, great points, both of you guys. Daniel asked a question, and it was funny because I had like an immediate flashback. Because Chris brought up contagious fire, and so he was asking what that is, and it brought my mind back to training defensive positions, and having somebody pop an ND off and have the entire line shoot into the wood line, and so that's essential. So Dan, what you can think of is like yawning. So one person yawns and the other person sees it and they yawn, and it just continues down the chain. That's kind of what it is. It's usually somebody fires off a round or a round gets fired, and it's instinctual that the next person fires, and then all of a sudden you have 2, 3, 4 people doing it, and it turns into a complete clusterfuck, complete goat rope before you can get a handle on it. But I'll let Chris take a shot at that because it was a question kind of because he brought it up. But contagious fire in the law enforcement perspective.
No, yeah, just like how you just nailed on the head. I mean, I don't think there's probably some textbook definition, but I mean that is an easy way of saying it, right? So anytime you operate as part of a team, because we're law enforcement or military, we're always at least functioning with another officer, right, or another teammate. So it's very important that we have confidence in that individual, right? And like I said, it goes back to fundamentals and discipline, right? So if there's two of us, right, there's 360 degrees that we have to cover, 3-dimensional as well. So I have to have faith and confidence in my partner to my left and right, or just my partner to my right. I need to have fire discipline. Just because I hear him discharge his firearm doesn't mean I discharge my firearm or immediately, go over into his sector, because he's relying on me to maintain my fire discipline and my sector discipline, if you will, to ensure we're maintaining that 360-degree security. And that is just with two individuals. Now, if you add 3, 4, 6, 7, 12 guys, or 2 stacks, or a platoon size element, that magnifies, right? That amplifies. So it's very important that it could be perfectly normal for a partner in another room to discharge a firearm. That doesn't mean that I have to discharge my firearm. Okay, that's why we should train officers in these environments, so to create a state of awareness that it's okay. If they should hear it, then we're going to revert to some sort of tactics, right? So in law enforcement, we don't really continue to push the fight unless it's like a hostage rescue or crisis situation. If it's a tactical situation where it's a barricaded subject or a warrant service, we're probably going to move to a position of advantage, then lock it down, do a roll call safety check, make sure we got all our personnel. If we need to deal with a downed officer or deal with a downed subject, whatever the situation may be, we're going to go through a set protocol based on fundamentals to handle that situation. So it's very important that we just are aware of some of the dynamic senses that occur in that environment. That just goes back to training, right? What are some normal stimulus we're going to hear? We might hear shouting. We might hear flashbangs. We might hear breaking and smashing from porting windows or breaching equipment or saws. I mean, we're going to hear radios and whatever the dynamic intelligence we're going to hear. It should be normal, and we should be accustomed to it. So it's not something that's scary, right? That's unnormal. So I think it's good that we acclimate our officers to that environment as best we can.
Yeah, great points. One thing I do want to bring up, and now I'm going to preface this by saying that it is not my intention to call into question any officer who's been involved in an actual incident or this incident specifically, but I think in the back of my mind, it was just bugging me about the contagious fire. I want to go to the Breonna Taylor shooting. I think that's a perfect example of that in a real world scenario, where one round was fired initially from the suspect inside the residence, and then 32 rounds were fired back and from most of those without having any threat, any target. There were some guys that moved around the side of the building, shot into the building where they saw muzzle flashes, but the muzzle flashes were those of their own guys. It was a complete mess. But I think that's a good example, real world, of when we talk about contagious fire, there was no more threat yet because rounds were still continuing to fire that the officer felt that they needed to continue to fire.
I couldn't tell you about the incident, and I'm not. I don't have all the details. Definitely wasn't there. But let's remember one of our firearm rules is make sure your target, what's before and what's in front of it and what's behind. So if you've got nothing to shoot at that is a threat to you, we're not going to start peppering walls and windows and whatnot, whether it's in this incident or another. It could be a negligent discharge of one of our fellow officers. It could be anything. Maybe the barricaded suspect just killed himself. So, when do we in training start shooting through walls and windows without guaranteeing our shots? We don't. So it's a training issue. And obviously, there's a human aspect to it because it's a stress response, and but no, definitely, and I'm sure we can come out with 100 incidents of that nature, or fire attracted, just more fire. It's a response. Well, I guess if my partner's shooting at, we must be shooting at something, so let's shoot. So.
That's correct, Nick. That's huge.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I said Nick, that's huge. Right? If I can't articulate why or a perceived threat, right? If I can't say that is a gun or if that's possibly a phone, I shouldn't shoot. If there's any doubt in my mind, because I have to basically say that that's what I saw, right? If it is what I saw and that's what I perceive that is a gun, then I'm going to deal with that. But if I can't say that's a firearm 100%, then again, that's where tactics come into play, right? We always want to maximize our use of cover, limit our exposure, utilize tactics that are going to increase our survivability, give us that distance to, again, think a little bit, right? It's like you're driving a car, right? When you're driving a car 100 miles an hour, right? We don't drive 2 feet off the bumper, right? Because it just doesn't give us that much reaction time. We increase our distance to give us a little bit more time, right? It takes a little bit of time to identify and then process and then deliver an outcome, choose an outcome, right? Based on certain other things, right? Whether Hick's law, right? The more choices I have, it increases the length of time to choose an outcome, right? And I know one of your one of the chats came up is, do we always use, for our scenario targets, use people holding guns? No, we use overlays. Overlays are great. And I've used it before when sometimes with our officers in training, we set up the same target and we just change the overlay. And a lot of times you'll see people just get lazy and they'll just because they shot the guy wearing the same clothing description, The first run, they just shot him because they assumed that it was going to be he was holding the gun again, but it wasn't. He was holding a cell phone. And then there's a lot of other things that come into play. The anatomical positioning of subjects, right? In the real world, people don't stand square to you, right? People blade when they pull guns. They pull guns out of pockets and waistbands, and their anatomical positioning changes. And from that aspect, as a officer, if I need to discharge my firearm in self-defense or in the defense of others, I have to be able to pick out a point of aim on that individual to make an incapacitating shot, right? So there's a lot of vision shift, and if I'm using an iron sight weapon system, I have to pick a point of impact on that individual to make an incapacitating shot, right? Or to achieve immediate incapacitation if I'm dealing with hostage rescue, right? And that window might be very small, and that's where we go back into responsibility. And I know the gentleman John earlier talked about, knowing holdovers, and officers aren't they're using pull weapons. And I would say, okay, if we're using pull weapons, I would go to your chain of command and be like, all right, we're going to set up a hostage scenario, and you're going to be presented with a quarter target from a head target for a hostage situation. Go ahead and make your shot. And if you can't make that shot, then that's a good argument for not having pull weapons, because you need to be able to put those rounds when they need to be when the time comes. And if you're not, then like I said, it's we can look at our at least in the United States, we can look at our accuracy for law enforcement. It's like over 60 to 7% of our law enforcement shootings occur in low light conditions. Our hit percentage is like 45% that find their intended target. So where does that other 55% go?
One
I
of
think one of the
the
aspects of the training. Sorry, Nate, 1 second.
No, go ahead.
One aspect of the training that sometimes gets overlooked because we have to kind of pump people through the system to get their quals in is that individual officer's mindset. Because Nick mentioned earlier on, this day and age, not so much in my unit, but you see frontline, they come in and, like you said, do I have cell service here or Wi-Fi or what time is this going to be wrapped up? And it's a mindset. So we can provide a lot of training to prepare the officer, but nothing replicates real world experience. And you have to look at officers. They could, have done, they could have gotten 100% on all their firearm quals over, 10 years, 15 years. But if they've never been in that true to life threatening situation where I could potentially die right now, or somebody's going to die if I don't do something. If they haven't been faced with that threat, it's very difficult to say how they're going to react. But to better their chances for success, we have to win over their mindset. They have to have that fighter mindset that we're not going to have. Let's face the fact, not everybody's going to have that mindset or going to want to even have that mindset, because there's some officers out there that probably would rather not have a firearm with them. They want the position without that potential of actually having to take a life. So that's one thing another aspect of training that we have to work on is that mindset. We're not going to train everybody to be that, get out there and do the job kind of a person where, superhero. But if we don't capture their minds of that, someday you may actually have to use lethal force, or here's what you may be faced with. If they just want to get through the training and then they walk away and just worrying about, okay, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Then I think we're losing a lot of the quality of training that we're providing. I don't want to say it's being wasted, but it's not going to its maximum potential if that person is not buying into the training you're providing.
Yeah, that goes back to attitude. Anytime we enter into a new area that we're learning, right? It can be any topic, right? I have to have that attitude, one, to receive that information, right? And take something away. I mean, or I could sit here and be like this, you guys can't teach me anything, right? I think Aristotle said that, to know that I know nothing is to be smart, right? I mean, and to sum it up, because we deal with people and they come from different backgrounds, different educations, different time on service, and especially when it comes to growth, a lot of people don't like the way things are. They don't like change. So it's very difficult to navigate and massage that growth. But you're 100% correct. But people have to, especially if you're carrying a gun for law enforcement, there is a responsibility. Somebody is relying on you, right, to respond to a situation and deal with it accordingly, right? And that can be anything from a domestic violence, right, to a verbal dispute, to active violence occurring right now. And we've seen, I think, a wide range of what to do and how we can do it better and what not to do, right? And it's up to each individual. Each one has his own path in life. And, you know, like as for me, I reconciled a long time ago. I will lay my life down for some child to live free and to grow up. That's a part of the deal, right? That's why I've been in service my whole life since I was 17. I'm 43 now. That's kind of like the group and the ecosystem I follow, right? That's service. I'm dedicated to service in my life, because hopefully one day, where my family lives, that there's officers just like that are willing to put themselves out there on the line, utilizing, you know, tactics and tools and resources in the right way to increase their survivability, but to also solve problems within the community. It's a very it's a very significant thing for sure.
Good points, everyone. And I think that part of our job is to contextualize the training that we give, in the sense that people like stories, like examples. And if we're on the range and we're just running drills, we know in which situation this could happen. We know, but coming up with a real live event, and as close to home as possible, without judgment. But because as soon as it's over the pond, it's in another country, it's another state or province, people are like, yeah, but that doesn't happen here. It happens somewhere else. So I think it helps when you can come up with live examples of where this drill or this technique or tactic would be useful. I think that strikes something in a lot of times strikes something in people's minds. The other thing is we're talking about, for example, school shooter. You know, if we start the drills in active shooter response by putting the scenario as this, you know, you're getting a call, but you're in the sector where your kids are in that school. You know, and usually when you talk about the kids, people react and they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, for sure, I would go in and let's find the shooter and let's, you know, so that can help. I think we have a hearts and minds component that we can use there when training our people to bridge the gap between what we're teaching them and how is it applicable when it happened before, and you know, make them realize that it can happen in their next shift or in 2 weeks or 2 years from now, or maybe never, but they need to be ready for it. So sometimes that pushes the right button in certain people, maybe not everybody, but you know, if we get a few more on our side that get it and want to perform and want to get better and want to learn, then it's then we're winning part of the fight anyways.
We're coming up to pretty much 3 hours here. We've been on this call. I told all of you that like it goes faster than you expect. It really does. I want to give everybody a chance to kind of have last thoughts on this, but I have one question, and I want to do a quick speed round. You get 60 seconds each to answer this question, because this is something I wanted to ask at some point, but now we got to do a speed round on it. I want to know your opinion on high port versus low port, or high ready versus low ready. So start with Craig.
They're both valid. Definitely can use it. Doing entries, you know, you could be the number 2 guy behind your number 1 going in a doorway where only one guy can get through at a time. High port gives you the ability that if that number 1 gets hurt.
Oh no, did we lose Craig?
Necessary. And again, I'm looking at extreme, you know, conditions here. Whereas low port, if you're the number 2 guy going behind me, he falls on top of you, your gun's kind of pinned into your body. I'm talking long gun here. I think they're both valid. Is that 40 seconds? Where am I at?
You're good.
Yeah, I think they're both valid, to be honest.
Nick?
Same here. Muzzle awareness. I don't think there's a wrong technique. I think there's bad applications of techniques or moments when they should not be used, because, you know, if you're behind a vehicle and you're a high port or high ready, and you're pointing at an apartment building because you're downtown somewhere, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe it's not applicable. But maybe if you're high ready covering a stairway, maybe that's the right place. Or number two, on an entry where you need to clear the first person going left or right to be gun up as soon as possible. So, but obviously, I wouldn't want to get a shot in the back of the head, or I wouldn't want to get shot in the back on the femoral by somebody anyways, by a partner. So we need to be really, really conscious of the muzzle awareness and trigger finger placement. And but I think both are valid. It's a very polarized debate for some reason. I think it comes from two different tier one units that have very different philosophies about that mainly. But yeah, I'm for them.
Chris?
I'll take the libertarian approach. I'll say let the individual decide based on the set of circumstances they're faced with. I know this is kind of like, like you said, it was very polarized, but at the same time, we're still trying to debate where to go, high port or low port, or how to get into a room. It's like, can we solve other additional problems if we're still trying to debate about these little things?
I love it. I wanted to bring something up confrontational at the end, because I think that's just the best way to do things. Last words for you guys. What are your thoughts on this? And where can somebody get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you? We'll start with you again, Craig.
Excellent. I'll just give out my email. Is that something I should give out, or is that something they can get through you? My email.
What we can do is, if you guys want to get in touch with any of these guys, instead of giving you guys out your contact, unless you want to give them like a social media or something, if you want to get in touch with them via email, shoot me an email and I will connect the two of you, and make sure you're not a crazy person first, or maybe you are. I don't know. We'll see how much entertainment I need that day.
Yeah, I'd say get my email through Adam. I appreciate that. I'm not big on social media. Again, this kind of a forum was a first for me. I think it went really well. This is excellent. Hopefully I can hop on some more. This is a great way. And, it does more than one thing. Apart from learning from the other members on the panel, it also might confirm that I'm doing something right. Or, hey, I want to get a hold of this guy after to get some more information, because here's where I'm lacking, and I really want to bring, my game up to the next level. And I think this person during the discussion hit a few points that I definitely want to implement in my training. So this is excellent. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Nick?
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was a great time. That 3 hours initially, when I spoke to Adam at the beginning of the session, I said 3 hours. That's quite a bit. And he said, "No, you'll see, it's good. We're gonna fly through that." And you were right. So thanks for the invitation. It was great to see all the comments and the questions as well. It's fun to see that. It's nice to see that we have so many people who are invested into firearms training and the tactics side. And thanks to Craig and Chris as well, and Lon, who's not here right now. But thanks for you guys. Great points all around. It's a great time.
Chris?
No, definitely. It's a great opportunity to be here. And like I said, thank you. And enjoyed getting everyone's perspective. I think in order to move forward in anything we do, we got to, like I said, just be humble and understand we don't know all the answers. And it's great to leverage, our network and technology. And right now, technology is happening at a rapid rate in many different sectors. And I think in our profession, law enforcement, we need to open our eyes and start looking at some of that stuff, and look at some of the organizations on the private sector that really have a niche, if you will, in some of these areas, and really exploit that to add benefit to the community. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to function safely, but add value to our communities, make the world a better place. And if we keep that in mind, right, everyone sweeps their doorsteps, the world will be a better place.
I love it. Well, again, thank you guys for taking the time to join us here. And if you can just stand by, wait out for a quick AAR. I'm just going to say a quick closing piece here. We'll end the broadcast, and we'll do a quick AAR after this for you guys. And to everybody here watching, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and joining us here on this event. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to put these and host these types of events for you. A few points. Tomorrow at the same bat time, same bat channel, not the same channel. I'm going to send you a separate link. We're going to be running the second IRT, and that is going to be more on instructor training and development. And so stay tuned for that. More information will be coming out of that tomorrow. Tomorrow for the IALEFI online conference, the majority of the sessions will be available first thing in the morning. There'll be a few that come out later in the day, and that's just to kind of space things out on our end to make sure that we're not overloading the system with the content. So you can watch and get as much of that content as you like. Make sure to go to the survey portion, the polls and surveys on the event app, and fill out those 2 surveys from IWI and Primary Arms, where you can win a brand new rifle or a brand new HD optic. Those are 2 fantastic giveaways, so make sure to fill those out and do those. If you have any questions about the event, please feel free to reach out to me directly on the event. You can just click my name on any of the sessions. You can send me a direct message if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer those for you. So thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here on the Instructors Roundtable, and we'll see you again soon.